here. We miss you. We miss you on Columbus Avenue.
He's locked out.
We,
You'll hear him when he's
Leo's
back.
snoring. So
Start
like,
going.
if you hear some snores, it's him snoring. So,
Be my husband snoring too.
Why didn't you leave it for me?
Oh,
long as
Susan,
one
this
of
will be
us-
much too lively for that.
Okay. Oh, and then Clary, the third item will be Margaret Bracken. I have a
Yes.
deck of slides for that as well.
Great, yeah. There are
Okay.
not many, but that's good.
Yeah, so they're all up and ready to go. I'm going to start
Great.
broadcasting now. So the public will be joining us as we speak.
Perfect. My computer says 6:29. And we have so far one public, two, let's see, three.
It takes a
Four.
minute for them to
Oh,
come
I
in.
see. Oh, lots. Hey, I see Chris Nolan.
Oh, you do? I don't. Okay.
He's
Oh,
on
is
the
he
bottom of my
on-
screen.
Is he on panelist? Oh, he's on panelist. Excellent. Okay. Okay.
Colleen is with us, great.
And Kimberly Rancourt, thank you for joining.
Hi, thanks.
Matt Ganrich is with us too, great.
Could the person whose phone number begins 305 and ends in 482, could you please identify yourself?
Mark, that's me. That's Doug. I'm having a hard time dialing in from my computer. That's me.
That's Doug McGowan or Doug Kleiman?
Doug McGowan.
Very good, thanks. Okay, oh, I'm behind here. Where's Elizabeth? And then where's Clary? Okay, Elizabeth and Clary are co-hosts of the meeting now, so you should have all the controls I do.
Let's see. Beats me, but okay, sounds good.
yeah, I'm here too. So
I see a funny little symbol I don't even know. It's like a little hill with a red circle in it.
Okay,
What's that?
I think we're all here, Clary. You and I are
I think
here.
we
and
are.
I think we can get this meeting.
Yeah, we've got Howard and Meg with us. So should we start?
I think that's
whenever
great.
you're ready.
Okay, so I'll start if that's okay with you, Elizabeth. And then on our first item, we have our co-chairs from our transportation committee as well. Hold on one second. I'm closing my door. Sorry, I told my husband he's not part of this meeting. This is the June meeting of the Community Board 7 Parks and Environment Committee on Zoom. And we have three items on the agenda tonight. The first is joint with our Transportation Committee. Our member, who I think is also in Transportation, Doug McGowan, is taking the minutes tonight. Doug, if there's somebody whose name you need to have spelled or something, just let us know. The first item is joint with the Transportation Committee. And I'm going to give just a brief intro on this. Howard and Meg and Elizabeth, of course, can add on that. And then we're going to turn first to Ken Coughlin to say a few things about it. So what it concerns is basically the signaling in the traffic signals, the traffic lights on the drives in Central Park. Oh, I should say that Chris Nolan, who is the administrator of Central Park, and Chris, what's your title at the Conservancy? Is Chris mute?
I've just unmuted myself. I'm the chief landscape architect, and I'm also the Central Park administrator.
Right. So is Caroline with us as well right now? I don't think so, not yet.
She was going to join us. So
He
she
was
should-
going to be, and maybe she'll join us. Okay, so particularly important with us for this first item is Chris Nolan from, we've just identified, and also Kimberly Raincourt from DOT and Colleen Chattergoon from DOT. So how this came about, I'll just talk briefly about this, is in the last couple of years, a couple of big changes have been made with regard to the drives in Central Park. One is, after many years of advocacy by many people, including our own Ken, cars, for the most part, private cars have been banned from Central Park permanently on the drives and otherwise. And the other thing is, a couple of years ago, the signals were in some fashion that I certainly don't totally understand, were automated. And with those two changes, as well as ever increasing use of the Central Park drives by every possible form of park user, questions have come up whether the signaling, the existing signaling is what is best for our present and our future. It certainly had been set in place at a time when automobiles were the primary user of the drives. So at the joint meeting of our two committees last month, where we ended up with a resolution that passed the full board with regard to enforcing traffic regulations in Central Park, both Ken and I had mentioned these changes, and we had sort of together been talking about these, and I'm sure Ken had been talking to many other people for quite a while about addressing the question of what are those signals doing now? How do they work now? Do they work optimally? Are they best suited for our present and our future in light of the things I've mentioned? So that's how we got here, and we are going to have a discussion about that tonight. We don't have a proposed resolution at this time. It's possible that we will have one as a result of this meeting. We may not. I know we've got lots of questions for our DOT and Central Park representatives. Howard or Meg or Elizabeth, did you want to add anything, or should we turn to Ken to speak a little bit about this? And then our normal procedure is we call upon members of our committees and other non-committee board members, and then we turn to members of the public, of whom we have 28 tonight. I see a list so far of 28. So when we get to members of the public, you'll probably be limited to 2 minutes. Mark keeps track of that. And also we would request, so far there's only one thing in chat, try to limit anything you put in the chat box to something that's really relevant tonight. It's really hard to run these meetings while you're got a lot of stuff going on in the chat box that is sometimes not central to the meeting. Ken, you ready to start talking a little?
I can talk a little.
Yeah, okay.
I hadn't prepared anything, but just a little background. The signals on the drive, obviously when the park was created, there weren't any traffic signals. And for like the first 60 years of the park's existence, there weren't, because nothing went any faster than a bicycle or a horse or a horse-drawn carriage. And then cars entered the park starting in 1899. And by about 1920, enough people were run over that they decided they needed to put in traffic signals. And so they started putting them in. And I imagine at that time also crosswalks, although I don't know when the crosswalks went in. And now at the point when cars were officially banned from the park, there were, I counted 47 traffic lights. I don't know whether that's a up-to-date number, but it's a few years old. And they've remained even though cars are no longer in the park. So it's really superimposing traffic control devices that would be used on a New York City street onto what's a recreational space. There have been many conflicts on the drive. There are many users of the drive. It's become the most used recreational space, maybe in the city, rivaled maybe by the Hudson River Greenway.
Maybe in the country, or maybe in the world.
Maybe, yeah. I was once on a flight many years ago from Europe, and I I saw they had a little advertisement for advertorial for New York City, and they showed the drive full of cyclists and rollerbladers and runners. And I thought, wow, I got to go there. But there have been conflicts, and there have been many meetings. I remember a meeting a decade ago with Gail Brewer and city council member from the Upper East Side. And that was a moment when the police department, when the Central Park Conservancy was ticketing, where they'd started a ticket blitz in response to complaints of cyclists running red lights and such like. And they had just started one of their massive ticket blitz, and there had been a huge pushback. So we had this meeting, and it was sort of agreed that the Central Park precinct at that time would only ticket failures to yield, which I thought was very reasonable. I think that Andrew.
Andrew. Go ahead, Ken.
I've been a part of a group called the Recreation Roundtable, which is a group of user groups of the Loop Drive who meet every so often to talk about problems on the Loop Drive. And this has been discussed frequently, and there have been discussions or calls among some people to remove the lights or to change them to something different, like flashing yellow. But anyway, that's pretty much where we are. And that brings us up to CB7's resolution of last week or 2 weeks ago, where we called for more police enforcement of the lights for cyclists.
Thanks, Ken. So before we continue, I want to welcome also Caroline Greenleaf of Central Park Conservancy, who's here with Chris Nolan tonight. And then just to mention our regular Riverside people are with us, Margaret Bracken and Jeff Martin, and Matt Genrich, who is the Parks Department person for all of the parks in our district other than Central and Riverside. So they're regulars with us and they're panelists with us tonight. I want to start the discussion on this because it's going to be a very open discussion about what people think, what questions are, what possibilities are, what mechanical, technical possibilities are with regard to these lights. I don't know. I hope somebody here knows the answer, whether it's Caroline or Chris or Kimberly or Colleen. Right now, you've got lights, whether they're 47 or some other number, maybe somebody will tell us. But I'm more often a pedestrian now. So when I'm crossing the drives, I get to a crossing and there's a sign that says, here's a button, pedestrian, press this button. And when I try that, sometimes it seems as if nothing is engaging. Sometimes it seems as if maybe something is engaging. But I have no clue, and I don't know that anybody has any clue who sees these buttons and sees the signs that say press this button, whether that's actually doing anything. Is it actually activating a change in light so that the pedestrian one will turn green, or is it irrelevant? Are the signs just a mistake at this point? What is the current story on how those intersections are governed? And if any of you can answer that, also can tell us, are there really still 47 traffic lights? Anybody can answer that? Don't all jump in.
They have to unmute it.
Yeah, I don't even see any hands up.
Yeah,
Chris,
the question if they're activated or not is really a question I think DOT would have to answer specifically. I would say that the control buttons are not universal across the lights. You might have noticed along users of the park that DOT has been in the process. It's a multi-year project to replace all the drive lights and the drive signals with modern infrastructure, and the project is not completed yet. Most of those control buttons are in the south end of the park.
Right.
They look like any street intersection. What the cycling on that is, I can't speak specifically to, and has it been universally activated across the park, or are they waiting for all of them to be done? What that is it's all part of the DOT infrastructure, so I would defer to them. But
Kimberly,
the modernization of that infrastructure is not all across the park yet, so not all the intersections. I don't know the actual numbers, but generally speaking, the signals correlate to crosswalks and are there to govern pedestrians crossing from vehicles.
Right, but do they actually do anything? That was one question. Colleen or Kimberly, do you know what the answers to those questions are? And are there 47 signals? Anybody know?
There are 47 signals with 6 that control vehicle drive crossings and 41 controlling drive crossings for pedestrians only. Those are the numbers that I have. The actual timing and actuation, I can check on while we're having this conversation and try to identify that.
Kimberly, what did you mean by the 6 that control vehicles? What did you mean by that?
47 signals with 6 controlling vehicle drive crossings, so it's where vehicles would cross the drive.
Ah.
And 41 controlling pedestrians only.
So Ken had the right number.
Where would a vehicle cross the drive? Sorry.
Go ahead, Ken.
I imagine service vehicles might pass to get into certain locations.
Yeah, 72nd Street. There's 72nd Street, the closed east drive as it enters the center drive. 90th Street coming into the park, there's a handful of them.
So before we turn to others, can we follow up with whoever, Colleen or Kimberly or Caroline, whoever, on one thing Chris just mentioned, which is the automation system that DOT started installing a good several years ago is not yet complete. Can somebody tell us what has been done in terms of automating the signals and what is yet to go, what is yet to be done?
I should just clarify my point.
Sure.
That the signals are automated. They cycle. I mean, the Kimberly from DOT mentioned that there's a pattern based on timing, that the lights go green or red to allow for pedestrian crossings. What I was referring to is the pedestrian activated signal, which could modify the timing. Those are not done universally. I don't know the time. I don't off the top of my head have the schedule on DOT's kind of multi-year, multi-phase project, or the exact scope of where they are. So the lights do control pedestrian crossings. You just don't have an influence on it if you don't have a button, and I don't know if those buttons are activated yet.
Right, it's not clear that you have an influence if you do have a button. That's where I started out, but yeah. Right. All right, so let's go around. First, Howard or Meg or Elizabeth, if there's anything you want to add up front here, and then we'll go around with board members and members of the public. It can be comments, it can be questions. Elizabeth, Howard, Meg first.
Well, I'll speak. I'm in the park all the time, and I don't think the current situation is working for pedestrians or cyclists. I think we have to rethink this. This is a vestige of the traffic era imposed on the millions of pedestrians and the thousands and thousands of cyclists. And we have to think through what would work for these people now. Taking a system that was designed for motor vehicles, literally designed for a type of transportation that's not in the park at all now, is kind of silly to think it would work for the users of the park now. So I think we have to really think through what would work, recognizing that the current system deserves no presential value because it was designed for something, an entirely different use.
Well, I'm reminded of I see Colleen. This is one thing. The thing about Zoom is you can see everybody's facial expressions, and I see Colleen sort of nodding there. This just reminds me of a quick thing that at our last joint meeting where we had the resolution discussed and later adopted on enforcement, we started to talk about this topic a little bit, and Colleen a little cagely told us that DOT and perhaps some other agencies had some thoughts in the works about the very things we're talking about tonight. So we hope we'll learn a little more or a lot more about that tonight. But Colleen and Kimberly, one reason that we really push to have this meeting tonight and not wait for another month or another whatever is we at CB7 really want to be part of that conversation and process of whatever is going to go on with these signals. Howard, is that it for you, Meg or Elizabeth, and then we'll turn to other board members?
That's it for me.
Okay, Meg, Elizabeth. Okay, Meg?
Yeah, I would just echo others. I would love to hear from DOT any other information about modernization processes and what that includes and what's encompassed within that and the status.
Well, maybe we should ask that now before we turn to other board members. If
Clary,
there's
could I
any-
interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, sure, Mark.
I just wanted to make you aware that, which I just learned from chat, that someone named Asha Harris, who is with PEP, has just been promoted to panelist. I'm not sure that's somebody who's relevant to this part of your discussion, but I wanted you to know that they're there.
Welcome, Asha. Oh, and I'm starting to see things in chat as well. So trying to keep track of the chat and the everything else, but thanks.
Yeah,
Mark,
I
and
think the
welcome,
PEP
Asha.
will be for the next item, so.
Yeah, I suspect so. But I guess before we turn to other board members and then the public, Colleen or Kimberly, or for that matter, Chris or Caroline, anything more you can tell us about the capabilities, the plans, the phased technological changes that are in the works already, so to help to focus the discussion?
So, I mean, prior to the COVID, we've met with the Conservancy a few months ago, or, I think it was early this year, to discuss some of the changes that we were thinking of making. And one being, looking at the signals and looking at markings. And I believe we talked about repaving, seeing what we can do with markings in that area. But we didn't commit to doing anything yet without having a follow-up meeting. But as you mentioned, Clary, with what we're thinking of doing, and if we're planning on making any changes, of course, we should share that with the board and give you a heads up to get your input on it as well.
Well, we're starting that tonight, and we're very glad of that. And by the way, we have my husband and I've noticed many times now recently, thank you for repaving across the 72nd Street transverse area. That's been a way improved surface there.
So nothing has been finalized yet. I know we're in discussion with the Conservancy on this in making changes.
Yeah, but I mean, the 72nd Street has been at least partially repaved, and that's a big improvement. Okay, so if that's it for upfront from the agency folks and from the co-chairs of the committees, let's just see who's going to have hands up. I'm going to look at panelists and see who's going to have hands up for to talk. Ken, your hand is up at the moment, but I see you've spoken already. And Ken, we will give you a chance to speak again, because you and I kind of put this together, and you're a real proponent here of moving this along. Jay, it looks like you're first. What do I need to do? You just need to, you're on mute anyway, right? Jay?
It looks like Jay and Doug and Barbara.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead?
Yes, please, Jay.
Yeah, I oddly enough, I actually agree with Ken and Howard that this system was designed for another era with different usages, and it should be looked at carefully to see if it makes sense based on the usage now. My question is, if DOT is already in the process of a project to update or revamp or change the infrastructure, what's the purpose of looking at it at all? It would seem to me that whatever decisions need to be made as far as adapting the controls to the current usage have already been made by DOT, and they're in the process of doing it. So is there a reason to waste a lot of time and energy in looking at the situation if it's a fait accompli? I gather we don't have, well, we do have somebody from DOT.
We have several. We have two people from DOT and two from the Conservancy. But I see Colleen looking like she wants to say something.
It's not a fait accompli yet, because we've started having, a dialogue with the Conservancy. We haven't made any decisions yet. Again, everything is in its early stages. So we haven't made any decisions to make any changes yet. That's the thing.
Oh, no.
So just to add to that, just to make the distinction between infrastructure and timing. So we are able to update like the physical infrastructure and modernize that, and then come back and look at potential timing changes.
Yeah, I would just add to that, you know, when I said modernizing the system and the infrastructure, it actually allows for different levels of control, whereas the old system
Right.
was,
Okay.
you know, this is about new conductors, new electric lines, getting panels up higher, and allows for more sophisticated, presumably would allow for more sophisticated timing control. And the infrastructure really relates to the street lights, which you need for ambient light, and a control device at the crosswalk. So this is really about timing, a timing difference. You still have
Okay.
vehicles on the drive, and you still have pedestrians crossings, and you need a control device.
So regardless of what the settings are at the pedestrian crossings now, how long the red lights are in one direction versus the other, is there like one place in Central Park? Is there like a control panel already in place that could change those settings for all of the signals, all 47? That was my understanding of what the automation, at least part of what the automation was. But is that correct? Someone?
No, I don't. I can't actually speak to that specifically. I don't think there's one master control. But the modern system, you would literally have to go to each single series and set a time clock.
Before. That's not true any longer.
No,
Yeah,
it's a modern system. So whatever the level of control, there's greater levels of control and greater levels of ease in modifying things.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to turn to everybody else that wants to speak. But this is a factual question, if anybody can answer it. If this were turned out to be what was desirable, and it may well not be, would it be possible mechanically, physically, technically, to set some or all of the traffic signals to be like a blinking yellow that would then be overridden when a pedestrian presses the walk button? I mean, is that within the technical capabilities of what now has been automated? Does anybody know?
My understanding is that technically it would be feasible.
Okay, that's good to know. That's a good basis for discussion then. So next on our list of board members who want to speak is Doug Kleiman, and followed by Barbara. Doug, if you are mute, unmute. I guess I'm unmuting you.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Particularly, the fact that we don't have motor vehicles aside from the working ones in the park. So I'm really excited about what we can do, and starting from scratch is a great idea. Might as well. And I guess just understanding this more technically, I know we have staggered lights in different avenues in the city, and some of them were controlled out of the Queen's office and the computer system there. Is this a separate system? And if so, are we going to have the ability to, or is the DOT have the ability to augment it as traffic conditions change, weekends, evenings, mornings, whatever it is? Also, and Andrew Albert would know the ability for the emergency vehicles to override the system if they need to come through. Forgot the name of that feature, and maybe
it's preemption.
Preemption, right? So, but I assume that there's a flow, right? There's the counterclockwise flow to the park, and presuming that if these lights are staggered, they will be at a safe speed, whatever is lawful and is considered safe. I'm assuming it's going to be under the 25 mile an hour speed limit. So I guess I'm asking, will they be staggered? Is the system controlled in an outer borough? Is a sort of a computer system somewhere? And the other question is, on the hardware itself, given that we are in the park, are these particular lights subject to landmark preservation?
Who wants to talk to that? Doug's
I'll just speak to the last point.
I don't think they're subject. Oh, go ahead, Chris, go.
Yeah, I mean, yes, they are subject, but the fixtures, the modernization of the fixtures, it's exactly the same fixture. Just like there used to be incandescent or not incandescent, that sodium. In the last 5 years, sodium vapor, they replace them with halogen lights. This is essentially the inner workings of the device. The exterior, they're painted Central Park green. The new fixtures came in and went Central Park green. And it really goes from it's a solid, it modernized. They literally had time clocks that you would, a mechanical clock that you would have to do. I can't speak to the specifics of the nuances of the system, but it is a contemporary modern system. I don't know if it's centrally controlled in Queens or by borough or how it happens, but I'll leave that to DOT. The lamp from an exterior visual perspective, the modernization hasn't changed anything from the park's perspective. It's an internal working mechanism.
Okay, Colleen, you were going to respond further on that.
I was just going to say that we always have access and control of the signals, traffic signals, and where we can make modifications if need be. If any changes are made, of course, we're going to monitor to see whether the flow is, moving in accordance. And if not, we can easily modify that via computerization. We don't have to be at the site. We can just do that, through the computers. Yeah, make the changes.
Okay, Doug, does that do it for your question?
I think, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I completely forgot, and we all forgot, I think, an administrative thing regarding our meetings, not on this topic specifically, but all board members, the one way we have to keep, or the only way maybe to keep track of our attendance is all board members should, under the chat, should put their name or put their name in present so that whoever then ultimately keeps track of who's at the meeting will have that record. I'm about to do it myself. All board members should sign in. It's not, the other panelists, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's not.
It'll be recorded. The meeting's being recorded. So as soon as you type it in, it'll
yeah,
be.
But it's a lot easier for the secretaries to know for sure, just up front.
And if I could just take this housekeeping moment to remind those who are on the phone, it would be great if they put their names in chat as well, so we know who they are. For their benefit, if they want to raise their hand, that's *9. And if they want to unmute themselves, that's *6. Thank you.
Okay, I see we're starting to get some of our board members signing in. Before we turn to Barbara Adler, who was next, we've got Caroline Greenleaf, who's a Central Park Conservancy, who knows answers to many things and is a good friend of our committee, vice versa. I'm going to call on Caroline because she may be able to add a little more to what we've been talking about before we turn to our next board member. Caroline, do I need to unmute you? I think you're not muted. You there, Caroline? Do we need to unmute her? She's got her hand up. She's not muted. Oh.
Caroline is unmuted according to my system.
And it's 7 o'clock, so we should all do our clap as we do every night.
For once, we can have our windows open. It's not super
All
humid.
right. Well, it makes us, whatever.
You can hear the people clapping. Yeah.
Right. But what happened to Caroline? She's got her hand up. She's not muted, but we've lost her. Why we lost her? Don't know. Mark, you have any theory?
I am trying, it now says ask to unmute. So it looks like Caroline is now unmuted. Caroline, can you go ahead? Caroline, my phone number is 917-691-0865. If you hear me and need another way in, text me and I'll do my best to get you on.
All right, let's meanwhile go to Barbara Adler with the next person with her hand up and she's not muted.
Okay, thank you, Clary. I think that the reason that the full board meeting last week, the pedestrian item for more enforcement passed so not unanimously, but overwhelmingly, is that pedestrians are terrified when they cross the drive. There are just tons of bicycles, and it's a good thing that there are bicycles, but somehow these two groups just don't interact well. There's a lot of people who are elderly, there's a lot of children, people who are just infirm, people who fall, and you take your life in your hands when you cross. And regarding the flashing yellow light, Colleen, that you mentioned, or phasing the lights in a different kind of way, the truth of the matter is that the bikes don't stop. They just don't stop. And when I was in the park over the weekend, and 6 bikes are coming all at once, and you signal to them to stop because you're in the middle of the crosswalk, they don't, and you have to jump around them. And that's not right. So I wanted to just point out something that between 2008 and 2009, the Central Park Conservancy did an amazing survey. The first one that was done since 1873, I believe. Clara, you probably remember this from the old days, but in those days when there were still cars in the park, the second most annoying item that people disliked about the park was cars. And at that time, bikes were right underneath them. Cars were 23.5% of the people said nothing, okay? They disliked nothing. 8% of the people said they disliked cars. And just under 6% of the people said they disliked bikes. Now we have no cars, but those bikes have replaced the cars, except they don't even follow the traffic lights. So whatever we do, I think we need to protect these two groups. I think it's really important. As a pedestrian, I want to continue to feel safe going into the park. And I have no real answers except maybe something like making the I don't know what you call it, but grooving the pavement in some way, putting in some kind of bumps to alert bikes that they have to slow down because they are coming to an intersection, neck downs or something to calm traffic other than 47 lights, which may be egregious. I don't know.
Thank you, Barbara. Caroline Greenleaf has, I think, solved her audio issues. Caroline, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Yes. Oh, yay. Okay.
And
Technical
we'd
glitch.
like to hear anything you want to tell us now, and we may have some more questions for you or invite you back to say some more things, but go ahead, Caroline.
Well, I just wanted to add that the original modernization design of the signals in the south, which has happened in the southern end, received very strong support from cyclists and pedestrians because it effectually was to eliminate the synchronization of the lights. The lights would stay green until the button was pressed, signaling to cyclists or any other vehicles that in fact it was red because there was a pedestrian trying to cross. So I just wanted to clarify that you know, now there is a frustration because lights randomly turn red on the drive, and everybody knows that. And the new system would have allowed there to be a very clear signal that, in fact, red meant you need to stop. There is a pedestrian either in or trying to cross the road at that point.
But then perhaps, thank you, Caroline, but then perhaps you can answer a question I started with, which drives me crazy as a pedestrian, which is where there is a sign that says pedestrians press the button and there's a button, does the button do anything? Does the button actually engage? I mean, maybe it varies. I don't know how many intersections, particularly in the south end of the park, have those signs and have the buttons. But I know when I press the button, sometimes it seems like the button's not engaging and certainly not affecting when the light changes. So are those actually in service now?
Yes, those are in service. I would suggest, and Colleen and Kimberly can certainly add any information, but we have also talked to DOT and really if you call 311 and report it, and every signal has a number on the pole, and report it to 311, ask for it to be fixed. It should go right to DOT as a request. When they do work, I will say, Clary, when they work, the lights turn almost instantaneously.
That's interesting because to my limited observation, they don't turn at all. And so maybe everyone I happen to have pushed doesn't work, but whatever. Okay, next, if that's it for now from you, Caroline, thank you. And we'll be back with you. Next board members who wanted to speak were Natasha Cosme, member of Parks Committee, followed by Rich Robbins. Natasha, you're on. If you're mute, unmute. No, you're not mute.
Yeah, no, I think you can hear me, can't you?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to echo what was said earlier about cyclists not respecting the traffic lights. I use the park literally every single day with my 2 kids. I'm sometimes over there for like 4 hours nowadays because of the lockdown. And I experience it every single day with my kids. So I just wanted to echo that. My second question or comment is, I was wondering if any usage study of the park was done recently, because we all know that there are a lot of pedestrians and a lot of cyclists and no cars. But is there any data, like what is the usage on a daily basis, during the week, on the weekends? If there is something out there, if that could be shared, that would be helpful. And my third comment is that not only have I seen a lot of cyclists, which we all have out in the park, but I've also seen more and more electric scooters and electric bikes out there. And someone told me, I don't know if it's correct, but their top speed is something like 20 miles per hour, which is like almost as fast as a car. And those are really hazardous and they simply do not stop. Just today, literally 2 hours ago, I nearly got mowed down by one of them. And, you know, my request would be to seriously consider either some form of enforcement specifically for these electric vehicles, or simply ban them from the park. Because it's one thing for a cyclist to be coming down the street, but it's another thing for a very fast electric vehicle to be coming down the street. So that was all.
Natasha, I'm not sure if you included in your list electric assisted cycles, in addition to the scooters and things like that. We see in more and more electric assisted cycles, which last I knew were not at this moment legal anywhere in New York State, but that's a changing thing.
No, I know they're not legal, but I see them more and more on the street and especially in the park.
We do too. We see them in Riverside Park as well. Going back to Natasha's, I think it was Natasha's question about to what extent have there recently been, or are there in the works, any overall usage studies of the types of the types and timing, et cetera, of park users? Chris, Chris or anybody?
Yeah, the last comprehensive user survey done was in the data, as Barbara mentioned, the data was collected in 2008, 2009. It was compiled into a report in 2011. Back then, it was actually we had done a series of user studies, the first one in like the mid 1980s and a couple of subsequent reevaluations of that data. But the last comprehensive was 2008, 2009. Took a couple of years to collect and process the data. It's a very, very involved process, particularly back then. It was literally maybe some of you were volunteers going out on weekends and control ways and clicking things and making observations and doing surveys. We are currently in the process of actually evaluating the current technologies and modern technologies to redo that survey and recalibrate that. The exact role of that, we're still in the early phases of actually doing that. And as technologies improve, our ability to collect data and process it in terms of use patterns, presumably should improve. Interestingly, the conclusions in the mid 1980s were that it was a split, or I should say, let's start with, it was 85% in 2008, 2009, 85% of park use was passive recreation, 15% active, which was actually a 5% reduction from the earlier studies, which was 80-20.
Do you have any sense whether that would be the same today, Chris?
I would have, having long tenured in the park, I would have thought in 2008, 2009 that there would have been a significant increase in active recreation. And in fact, 5% change, I don't know what the margin of error would be. It was essentially the same or a reduction. Which really points to the massive increase of use of passive recreation in the park as a respite for people, the pedestrian issues. I don't know, that the level of intensity of active recreation hasn't increased any more than the level of intensity of those passive recreations. I would say they're probably proportional. More use means more conflicts. That's just what we're experiencing. And new technologies. Some years back, rollerbladers were like the new thing. Now there's increase in bikes, there's bike share, and there's these other forms of transportation, electric scooters, Caroline can go on for quite a while on the different things. There's the single wheel, there's all sorts of things that are just, there's no regulations or that really address these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd all probably have some interest in new user studies, but in a sense, I don't find that all that important because it's so obvious to us. I mean, any of us who spends a minute in Central Park sees how many zillions of competing users there are, trying not to run each other over, at least most are trying. And, you know, to me, the most graphic thing is the quotation from our former Parks Commissioner, Adrian Benepi, a year or two ago, where he says, Central Park is so crowded with so many users and it's so dangerous and there's so many people competing with each other that I don't even go there anymore. It's sort of the inversion of the Yogi Berra line. And I mean, we all see it. Our next board member who wanted to speak is Rich Robbins, but Caroline, your hand is still up. Did you want to add something or should I turn to Rich Robbins? Do we still have Caroline on audio?
Yeah, I'm unmuting and I will take my hand down. I apologize.
Okay, no, that's quite all right. So Rich Robbins, and then we'll do any other board members, and then we've got quite a few public people who I think want to speak. So Rich Robbins.
Yeah, and I came in a few minutes late, so I apologize if I repeat what other people said. I took a ride through the loop last weekend, and I very, very strongly recommend that everyone do it, just to get a sense of what it's like as a cyclist. And I think I agree with the people talking on behalf of pedestrians. It's complete chaos. And there's just people everywhere on both bikes and pedestrians. And I think there is, you know, obviously concern about conflict, and we need to address that. And I think we have to really understand what's happening and what's causing the chaos so that we address it in the right way. What I did, I rode the loop, I entered at 100th Street and went as far south as 72nd Street, then back north to 100th or wherever the cutover is, and back to, I think I exited at 96th Street. It happened that there was an NYPD van driving in the motor vehicle lane as I was riding in the bike lane. What I found was there are pedestrians in all three lanes, there are cyclists in all three lanes. There are people crossing everywhere, not just at crosswalks. There are cyclists stopped in the pedestrian and the vehicle lanes, and also cyclists riding slowly in the vehicle lane, which caused the NYPD van to weave in and out of the bicycle lane. I stopped at every red light and waited for the duration of the red light. And at many of them, there was no one anywhere nearby. So I was just standing there at a red light, no pedestrians nearby, no vehicles, just waiting for the light to change, which felt, you know, just completely unnecessary. At one, I waited for a minute, had a green light, started to go through, and there were pedestrians standing on the side of the road when they had the crosswalk to, when they had the light to cross the crosswalk. As soon as I got the green light, they had a red light, they started crossing and went right in my path. Many other times there were pedestrians like nowhere near the crosswalk, just walking through the traffic lanes. And so it's chaos. I think when I had a green light, if I didn't watch out for pedestrians, there'd be a conflict. And one thing I've learned as a cyclist is that pedestrians ignore bikes, whether or not we have the light. So, and whether or not they're in the crosswalk or in the street. And what that teaches me as a cyclist is I always need to watch out for pedestrians, whether or not I have the light, whether or not they have the right of way or I have the right of way, because I'm in the vehicle, I have to make sure I don't hit them. And I think to some extent that trains cyclists that, you know, since you have to always watch out for pedestrians, if you come up to a red light and there are no pedestrians around, it's not like you're in a car. It's not like you're going 25 or more miles per hour. If you're going 5-10 miles per hour, it's easy to see if anyone's around and to make a decision at that point. To the point that folks raised about motorcyclists, I think we have to be careful about realizing that there's a lot of gray area between non-powered and powered cycles. And I was riding in it happened, I got a city bike. The only one available was an electric one. They don't go that fast. And I think we have to watch out a lot more for people racing on racing bikes than people going on electric bicycles. You also, with new bicycles, you don't even know if it has a battery inside or not. They're very camouflaged, and they really mix together. I think it's a question, and I've said this before at meetings, it's a question of how fast people are going, not whether they're riding something that has a battery and a motor in it, or if they're able to go 30 miles per hour just wearing spandex on a $10,000 non-electric bicycle.
Sorry.
And ultimately, I think there's a big problem, and the biggest issue with it is the design. That there's just conflict. There are pedestrians who are going every which way. Their bikes going way too fast, and there's risk of conflict. And you're not looking to point fingers. We have to be most sensitive to pedestrians because they're most at risk. But at times they're putting themselves at risk, and we just need clear design to make sure that we're trying to eliminate the conflict as much as we can.
Well, I think this discussion is starting a lot to overlap the discussion we had together last month, and then that led to our resolution that we passed at full board about enforcement, whatever the vehicles are. And I guess just about everything we've talked about other than a pedestrian is a vehicle of some sort. But we're a bit off topic. We need to try to stay on the topic of the signaling, what is technically or mechanically possible, what kinds of suggestions do we have, and how we very much want to be part of what is currently a dialogue between DOT and the Conservancy, but we want it to be at a minimum a trialogue with us involved and the other surrounding boards as well. The only other panelist hand up is Ken's, I think, unless Caroline, your hand is still up.
Howard has a question.
I'd like to.
Sure, Howard.
The fact that we're all here is because the 47 lights aren't working, and we have a system that just invites cyclists to violate it. It's not going to work. You could put an officer at every light if you're just not. Let's just talk about reality. You're not going to get a cyclist to not go through a red light when there is no one around. I don't know if there's any goal in doing that. The goal is to increase safety for pedestrians and cyclists. And so where I'm going with this is, Colleen or whomever, what is the DOT or the Central Park Conservancy thinking would be a better system? A system that would encourage compliance by cyclists and increase safety for pedestrians. I'm just going to throw one thing out there. I'm not sure it's the right thing. A flashing yellow. A cyclist has to stop if there's a pedestrian, period. That's just one idea. But the point is, we shouldn't be beholden to the 47 lights. They're a vestige from a different era, and maybe they make sense, maybe they don't, but we have to start thinking anew.
Howard, we started out and have already spoken of those questions, not as suggestions or answers, but at least questions tonight. Number one, do we really need the 47 at this point? And number two, is a flashing yellow light system at sometimes in some places, et cetera, is that technically doable? And we got the answer, yes, it's technically doable. So we've started at least a discussion on those points.
But I would start, Clary, one step back further. What's the perfect system? And then see if we can have it. Let's not say we have the 47 lights. What would be the best system to assure safety for pedestrians and assure compliance for cyclists? And then see if we can have it.
That seems to be what we all would like to aim at and be part of the discussion about. DOT guys, take that seriously. I was going to turn to members of the public, but I saw a moment ago, I think that's Susan. Let's see.
Can I just clarify?
No, she's not up. Yeah.
Can I just clarify a point? This is Irena Stennett. I keep hearing Conservancy and DOT. The Central Park Conservancy manages Central Park under a contract with the Parks Department. And any final decisions dealing with the Park Drive is a city agency decision. The Central Park Conservancy can be brought in for consultation, but this is a city park. And I think we need to remember that we're talking about the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation and the Department of Transportation. And then the Conservancy can be brought in consultation, but they're a nonprofit under contract with the city. They don't promulgate laws governing Central Park.
Thanks, Irina. I think most of us know that, but some may not. So thanks for that. Ken, I think you're now pardon me?
Just to build
Yes,
on Irina's
Chris.
point, Ken had talked about the Conservancy and the police department issuing tickets. The Conservancy has never been in the issue of enforcement.
Yeah.
We do work very closely with the Parks Department and kind of represent the issues at hand. I would just ask for, there seems to be kind of competing information that pedestrians suggest that cyclists don't stop at red lights. But then there's cyclists who say if their lights were flashing yellow, that we would stop to allow for crossings. In the current condition, the red lights don't govern anybody. So there's an issue with infrastructure and design, but where there's a crosswalk, you have to have a control device to say one group has the right of way versus the other. And so the infrastructure is being built and the infrastructure is there and there's all sorts of things, but it still comes back to this fundamental issue is that if cyclists, there seems to be some information that cyclists don't stop at red lights. If they were flashing yellow, would they begin to stop? And if pedestrians don't pay attention to the walk, don't walk, would a change in that system make a difference? I mean, I think they're just to broaden the discussion. This is not just an issue of design and traffic control devices. This is an issue of use and patterns of use by people. As a designer for 30 years, you can design anything. If people don't use it in the intended way and don't follow the procedures, there's only so much there's only so much control one can exert through design and technology. I think it's important that having the board involved in the discussions, that this is not just an agency issue, an issue of infrastructure and vestiges of an era. The crosswalks are going to need to be there because there's a crosswalk and there needs to be something to tell one group to go and one group to stop. And the technology, as DOT and Caroline mentioned, is modern. So perhaps in the future, it could be different on a Monday morning at 10 o'clock than on a weekend at a different time. And as use patterns change, that can evolve and change, but nothing is changing unless there's community engagement about a culture of cycling and a culture of pedestrian where red means red and you stop. And the hand that says don't walk means you don't walk. There's nothing the agencies can do, and there's nothing we can do in our dialogue with the agencies to govern personal conduct, those people who are using the infrastructure and using the resource.
Chris, I think part of at least my technical question about the possibility of blinking yellow lights, what was a component of my question at least, was if you did at certain hours at certain places of low usage or low pedestrian usage have a blinking yellow light, you would also have a working pedestrian button where if the pedestrian pressed it, it would turn red for the cyclist. That having been, and I understood previously that is mechanically, technically possible even now. That having been said, your point that none of that, even that doesn't do any good if the pedestrians are cruising across when they don't have the green, and if the cyclists are cruising across no matter who has the green. If user behavior isn't governed by the signals, then where are we?
Right.
Okay, Ken, I know you wanted to speak again. Ken, would it make sense to wait for you to hear public people, or do you want to say something first now?
I didn't give.
Excuse me, Colleen looked like she wanted to say something a moment ago. Colleen?
I was just going to say, Chris is absolutely right. You can change the design and you can try to modify the design so that it works for all users. But at the end of the day, it boils down to compliance. I think that's what matters the most is compliance. Because if you don't have pedestrians or cyclists complying with the rules and regulations, then it defeats the whole purpose of the design. And just so you know, we work very closely with the local precinct to make changes whenever we get issues with cyclists not complying, or if there's a missing sign, they always reach out to us and let us know about that. But the compliance is the key issue here.
But the more reasonable and rational the system, the more likely you're going to get compliance.
Well, I don't know about that.
Either that or maybe some affirmative results from the resolution we passed at the full board, which is looking for some enforcement. Maybe that will have some impacts on behavior if anything happens pursuant to that. A combination of things. Ken, did you want to say something before we turn to the public?
Yeah, because when I spoke in the beginning, I was just sort of giving historical background
Sure.
rather than my
Go
own
ahead.
comments. We have not, I mean, we're not, all we've done is, with the red lights, is create an unreasonable expectation for cyclists. And then we're surprised when the rule is flouted. And basically nobody, I've stood at lights in the park on the loop, you know, for 10 minutes and hardly a cyclist stopped at a red light. That kind of tells you something. Yeah, now you may interpret that cyclists just don't obey any laws, but I choose to interpret that maybe this is a law that's unreasonable. And maybe we should try something different. And in fact, there are a few unsignalized crosswalks in the park, some of which are pretty heavily trafficked, like at 85th Street, the crosswalk that leads to the north end of the Great Lawn. And I don't know whether there are any more problems there, and maybe there are fewer problems, because I think really what's happening is that the red lights are creating more conflicts than they're preventing. And I think that at some very dangerous intersections, we should try the flashing yellow lights, and we should make it a culture of yield to pedestrians in Central Park, which I think is entirely reasonable, as opposed to a culture of thou shalt stop at a red light and wait, even if nobody's there, which is very unreasonable. And at other intersections, we should explore making it like 85th Street on the West Drive, where you just have a crosswalk, you have a sign saying pedestrian crossing, maybe you say yield to pedestrians, and that's the culture. And I'd be more than happy to go out there, and I know many other people in the cycling community would also, and spread the word that a culture of yielding to pedestrians is now going to prevail in the park.
Thanks.
Co-chairs, could I
Yes,
just jump in for a quick
Mark.
second?
Of
No,
course.
I'm not going to comment on the
No,
dialogue.
you're the big boss. You can say anything you want.
So what I'm going to say is that it's 7:30. We've been on this for an hour, and we have yet to turn to the public. So I encourage you to do that.
Yep, we're
And we
about
also
to.
have a pretty full agenda. So we want to start thinking about getting on to the next topic, especially given the full discussion you've already had. So this is me being the time nudge.
Thank you. We're about to turn to the public. We've been about to do that for a while. Hindi had a hand up, but Hindi Schachter I saw first. Hindi Schachter, followed by Neil Weissman, followed by Lisa Orman. Now, Mark, we're doing a 2-minute rule here, right?
Given how the discussion is going, that is your discretion, but I would be a little bit generous since we have not put ourselves on a clock.
I think you just sort of reversed your prior remarks here, but okay. Yeah. Okay, let's just everybody be as expeditious as they can. Hindi, followed by Neil Weissman, followed by Lisa Orman, and then Ian Clark. Hindi. Do we have to unmute Hindi? Allow to talk is what my thing says. Hindi. Did I get Hindi? Oh,
I'm
unmute.
Hindi Schachter. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. I'm Hindi Schachter. When I hear Barbara Adler or Natasha Kazmi talk about cyclists who don't obey the law, there's nobody who has suffered more from the unusual cyclist who creates havoc in the park than the person who's talking now. As was mentioned at your last meeting, on August 3rd, 2014, my husband, Irving Schachter, my beloved husband of 47 years, was running in the park. A cyclist came into the pedestrian lane at speed, collided with Irv. That was the end of a beautiful life. In the aftermath of that tragedy, I have spent a lot of time on issues such as the ones you're talking now. And I have come to 2 conclusions. One, Redesign is what's going to create a safer park. Not enforcement, but redesign. Second, redesign to work has to work for everybody. A lot of the comments I've heard here are separating the needs of pedestrians from the needs of cyclists, as if they're two groups that are antagonistic. I don't see it that way. I believe the only park that will be safe for cyclists is the park that's safe for pedestrians. And the only park that will be safe for pedestrians is the park that's safe for cyclists. And how will that come about? It will come about because the park works for everybody. Right now, we say we have a car-free park, but we have nothing of the sort. We have all kinds of park vehicles. We have parked police and other vehicles. The park is still striped with a whole lane reserved for cars. That space that could be used to make a park that would work for cyclists and work for pedestrians. So what's my advice? My advice is, let's try to come together and think through how we can totally redesign a truly car-free park. I think Olmsted would have loved it, and I think we will have cyclists, pedestrians, and all the other scooter folks, skating folks also loving it. One comment I have to end with talking about, and that is, somebody said, let's ban electric bikes. They go 20 miles an hour. My husband, even in his 70s, could go faster than 20 miles an hour on a not electric bike. So there's nothing peculiar about electric bikes in that way. And I bring up that comment because here's the choice we face. Are we going to go into our little silos and say, these users are good, these are bad? I don't think we'll ever get a safe park that way. Or are we going to say, what does everyone need? Can we have a park that works for everyone? If we try to do that, I think we can increase the park safety. And to end talking about lights, since that's what I'm supposed to be talking about, who gains from the lights now?
Hindi, I think we need to thank you, and we need to move on to some of our other public members and then our other our public participants, and then some of our other items. But thank you very much. I certainly personally remember the occasion when your husband was killed, and it was a very difficult, sad event, and you had our sympathy. It was going to be Neil Weissman, followed by Ian Clark, and followed by Lisa Orman and Ian Clark. I don't currently see any other members of the public who want to speak, but we'll catch up with that when we need to. Neil Weissman, I'm going to unmute you. Where's Neil? I lost him. Oh, okay. Neil Weissman, you're unmuted.
Okay, can you guys can hear me?
Yeah.
I am the Public Relations Director for New York Cycle Club. I'm a past president. In 2015, New York Cycle Club and Century Road Club Association developed what we called a cycling protocol for Central Park. It essentially limits fast group riding to before 8 a.m. on weekdays and very late at night. Earlier in March, I got a phone call or an email from Carolyn Greenleaf and said, Neil, please limit it to 7 a.m. And put out the word to the cycle club, which we did. We were happy to do that. Just with the social distancing, it was common sense. I want to just give some context here. New York City has 800,000 cyclists. It has got no recreational facilities that aren't shared with pedestrians and runners. There are also 20 cyclists a year who die on city streets. So I hear everything. I understand. If I have a perspective here is that you need to greenlight something. When we passed the protocol in 2015, we talked with the Central Park Police, and they just said, incidents have dropped by 1/3. So we were able to vacuum a lot of the people who you complain about to a part of the day where the pedestrian usage was minimal. I would say going forward, if you can, if you can be flexible about your implementation, I think you will serve the safety of pedestrians, common sense and sanity in the park, which I think everybody wants. That's my comment. Thank you.
That was exactly 2 minutes. Thank you.
And Neil, I have a question for you because I hadn't really thought about that till you just spoke, but I'm not personally in Central Park that often, but I am a lot in Central Park. I have not been seeing what Doug Blonsky used to call the spandex crowd all that much. That is these groups of spandex clad, lots of bikers wear spandex, but the groups going very fast and doing it as a group. Has your initiative actually been fairly effective in limiting the group riding, the group exercisers, do you think?
Well, apparently, based on your observation,
Yeah.
it has. But I'd say, I think it's sort of understood. Or just common sense. People. I think the serious cyclists sort of know to get in and out early, so you don't see us. So that confirms your observation.
Well,
my
observation is very
if I-
limited, but thanks. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
if I may on that, just this is the other co-chair of the committee.
Yes, Elizabeth.
I think we need to get data on sort of who's coming in and out of the park when they're cycling and so forth before we can make those sort of judgments. I think there are a lot of people who see a lot of fast cyclists. There are a lot of people who don't. I think that's beyond the scope of this meeting tonight.
I think we all see a lot of fast cyclists. The question is how many groups. But anyway, next, Lisa Orman, 2 minutes, followed by Ian Clark, 2 minutes. Lisa,
yep,
you're
I'm
unmuted
on.
already.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Orman, Director of Streetopia Upper West Side. A number of concerned Central Park users came together to form a group called Central Park Advocates recently. We are walkers, bikers, parents, dog walkers, and we all love the park. We are solutions oriented, and many of us have been working for years to improve conditions in Central Park, some under the umbrella of the Recreational Roundtable, which was mentioned earlier. We want all park users to feel safe in the park and to be safe in the park. And we operate under the goals of making the culture of the park one of welcome, safety, and respect. First and foremost, as Elizabeth just said, we need more information. We need more information on the most heavily used pedestrian crossings. We also need accurate and unbiased crash data, not second or third hand information, where are crashes happening and why are they happening? And perhaps a resolution tonight can ask for more data and information. Cars are out of the park, yet we hold on to this obsolete traffic-oriented design of the loop. We need to reclaim that 1/3 of the park reserved for vehicles. There's no reason to reserve 1/3 of the loop for the occasional park vehicle or emergency vehicle. I think that design, not enforcement, will change behavior. We've seen this on the streets, and the same holds true in the park. At non-busy intersections, traffic lights could be flashing yellow or removed. At busy ones, we could use physical changes to the loop to make them safer. And we sort of feel like a broken record when we say that we need safe ways to cross the park. The 97th Street path is truly pathetic. We need to fix this path, and we need many more ways to cross, including at 86th Street, 66th Street, and elsewhere. We have a document with tons of ideas for improving the safety of the park, and we'll be sending that to CB7, Parks, and Central Park Conservancy in the next few weeks, and we look forward to working with you all.
Thanks, Lisa. Ian Clark, 2 minutes. Let's see, allowed to talk, unmute. Ian, nope, I'm sorry, that was Hindi. Where's Ian?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, Ian.
Hi, great. So I'll try to be quick. So I don't normally talk about stuff outside of skateboarding, but I just thought I'd mention this because I do cycle in the park from time to time. Just thought it's worth mentioning the drive for cyclists is a wonderful, rare place to ride without having stop signals every block. And it's this magnificent 10K loop. It's the greatest. So I think unimpeded cycling is something very special in Manhattan in the drive and something to be protected if at all possible. Neil Wiseman earlier reiterated one of my other points, which is times of day. If you want to go fast in the park on the drive, Sunday afternoon is absolutely irresponsible and dangerous. Early in the morning, later, that's absolutely cool. But, you know, so another point, perhaps artificial intelligence, now we have it, maybe some kind of artificial intelligence with sensors and smart signaling, so we don't get red lights at the wrong times. And another little point I'll bring up from the skateboard world, we have skate park etiquette. It works really well in a skate park. I'm not sure if it's possible to have park etiquette in the park, if it's possible to try to encourage some kind of park etiquette. That's it. Those are all my points. So thank you very much for your time.
I see no, does any other co-chairs, would you take a look? Oh, Ira
Gershenhorn.
Ira, you're going to be unmuted. Wait, I just did, sorry, I just did Lisa. I got to get Ira. Unmute Ira. Did that work?
Maybe, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So yeah, what Ian was saying is like, it is really sad that there's no velodrome in all of New York City other than in Queens. And yeah, I've used the drive, the Central Park Drive to get to Queens. So I've only been on from like 100th to, I don't know, 59th or so. And it is a madhouse. People are walking in every lane, going slow, biking slow in every place. It's just nuts. And yeah, I can stop. I'm not, particularly fast, but on those downhills, I can hit 20. There's a readout. And yeah, it was reporting 20 miles an hour on my bike, and I don't have electric. That's all.
Thanks, Ira. And I think that completes comments from, does it? Anybody see? I don't see any other hands, either public or board members.
Actually, I see Andrew Rosenthal, and it looks like Ellen Azarin or
Yeah, I don't know why that, I'm not seeing those, but I'm gonna, okay. Mark, do you just want to, before I even find him, you want to unmute Andrew Rosenthal? And he's not showing on my screen. I don't know why.
Andrew, go ahead. Andrew, I show you as unmuted. Go ahead.
It's not coming up on my screen at all. Andrew, are you there? Well, we'll come back to him if he shows up again. Mark, who was the other one you've got on your screen?
I'm now down to that one. I'm sorry.
Oh, I have Andrew Rosenthal here. Yeah, and I'm going to try again to unmute Andrew.
Very good.
Andrew, you there? Don't know.
And the other one was Ellen Azarin, but her hand's now down.
Okay, so
looks like she's requesting again.
Elizabeth, Howard, Meg, where do you think we are?
It looks like Ellen is requesting again, so I don't know if she has unmuted herself or if she's, folks gotta unmute their phones if they want to talk. Otherwise, we gotta move on.
Not showing on mine at all. Ellen Azarin, are you there?
Yeah, I think I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah, Ellen, 2 minutes.
Okay, very good. I want to just focus on one thing because you've covered an awful lot of territory already. I would like to distinguish between the recreational use of the park and the transportational use of the park. There are those of us who most of the time that we're in the park is because we need to get from one place to another, and it's the safest way to do it. And sometimes it's the only way to do it. I live on the west side, and a lot of where I need to get to is on the east side. And there's just no way to do it. There is no legal, safe way to cross the park between 59th Street and 110th Street. There's 72nd Street. It has its problems. We've talked about them. They need to be resolved. I'm on 79th Street. There's a nice entrance on 81st Street. Well, I don't want to go into the solutions. I just want to raise it again because it keeps coming up and we keep talking about it and nothing ever gets done. We've been talking about it for years. There has to be a way for transportation users of the park to go from west to east and vice versa.
Ellen, I'm going to interrupt you here, although maybe you're done because you're off topic for tonight. But about 3-4 months ago, we had a joint committee meeting of our two committees that did result in a resolution that passed our full board, in which we asked the various agencies working together to explore and come back to us with some affirmative suggestions, plans, whatever, with regard to possibilities of safe cross routes for cyclists and others. So that's we got that one already, and we're working on it. And
well, I don't.
Back from the agencies.
Not to interrupt.
Tonight we're talking about signaling on the drives, and we need to wrap up this item because we have a lot.
Okay, May, then can I just leave it as a request because it's not happening despite the many attempts to make it happen.
Yeah,
It's
I think
just
that's
not
noted.
happening.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
Thanks.
Okay, so Elizabeth, Howard, Meg.
Well, I think is Andy unmuted for 2 minutes?
Andrew Rosenthal, of course, if he's reappeared. Andrew Rosenthal, you there?
I see him.
I think I've got him unmuted. Is he there?
Okay,
Still
sounds
not
like he's
coming
okay. I think we need to move on if we've given him a lot of chances. to join.
So, I mean, we did not come in with a resolution. We've had the kind of discussion I think that we wanted to have. We've had some good attendance here from DOT and Central Park Conservancy, who certainly are always good listeners. Are we doing anything tonight? I see.
I think we should ask for a study on what would work. Hindi Schachter said it best. It has to work for everyone. Right now, it's working for no one. And to double down on a strategy that's not working is a mistake. Let's just hear what they can come up with. There was a discussion of who really has jurisdiction over this. There's the Parks Department, there's the Police Department, there's the Central Park Conservancy. There are a lot of, there's the DOT. Someone should take a look at this and try to figure out what would be optimal.
Howard, I don't think they're really jurisdictional questions on the signaling. I mean, this discussion is
I'm not talking about the signaling. I'm talking
signaling on the drive.
Look, I want to step one step before the signaling. What's best? Maybe there's no signaling. Maybe there are just zones where cyclists have to stop, like a flashing yellow. Someone should take a look at this and figure out what would work. All I know right now is what we have works for no one. So someone who's more expert than I, and there are no shortage of those people, should look at this and figure out what would work, and then we could discuss it. I would propose a resolution calling for that.
Well, I mean, I think we're clear that the agency that actually does this is DOT.
Okay.
And they do it in whatever they do. I hope they do it in consultation with us and other community boards, but they do it in consultation with the Parks Department and the police.
Then
And
let's have a resolution calling for the DOT in consultation with those other parties to take a look at what would improve safety and the functioning of the park for cyclists, pedestrians, and other users.
Mark, let me ask you, Mark, what we have certainly learned, it's hard enough to write a resolution when you've got 50 people in a room. It's even harder to do it when you've got 50 people on a Zoom meeting. If we have a sense of our committees that we want to ask some type of forward movement in terms of studying, and I really think it has to be traffic on the drives and signaling on the drives. That's our topic tonight. Our topic tonight has not been let's rethink Central Park. It's been signaling on the drives, and it's a very, in my view, valid topic to ask for a study. And we could, in light of the changes we've talked about in current situation and future. But if we are inclined to do that, Mark, what's your advice about how we get from this minute with yet more of an agenda and 50 people sitting here to something to present to the full board, first of all, to vote on, because we've seen kind of the way that processes have fallen apart at some of these meetings between somebody saying, let's have a resolution and writing it and amending it and, you know, all of that. And then you get to the full board and people say, I didn't even know what I was voting on.
So the best you can do in this time right now, first of all, I want to observe that I heard the conversation earlier in the evening saying that the agencies that you're talking about, DOT, DPR, the NYPD and so forth, I heard folks tonight say in effect that work is already going on. So it sounds like we're trying to get a resolution to get folks to do what they're already doing. It may have been, and now I'm just going to take a liberty and say, my guess is that COVID was not a friend to that process, both from working at home and from a variety of other aspects. So I heard, so I'm not certain what it is that a resolution would add to that discussion. That said, the best you can hope for to answer your question specifically, Clary, is to have as clear a therefore statement as you can come up with tonight that Doug will record in the minutes, and Doug is already regretting having volunteered for the minutes.
Oh, we recruited him.
You know, and that statement is as clearly expressed, and then I don't think you'll have, my hope is that you'll be able to craft the whereas clauses, we don't call them that anymore, to go along with it. But if you have a clear statement of what it is that you want somebody to do, and it is different than what's already happening, that will be the best you can hope for tonight. And then we'll just have to be generous with each other at full board about circulating drafts in advance and making sure that there's some sort of consensus that yes, that's what I voted on.
So before we struggle with doing that, I think it might make sense if we can figure out how to do this, to have some kind of a sense of the members of both committees, whether we think we want to do a resolution tonight or whether we think we've, you know, well enough injected ourselves into the ongoing process. Susan, I'll get to you in a second because I see your hand is up. Mark, is there a way you can readily suggest that we can, in the fastest way, find out whether we want to do a resolution before we try to do one?
Well, if everybody would lower their hands that has raised their hands in order to speak, we could do a straw poll and see if there's interest in a kind of resolution on the order of magnitude that you spoke about. So I see the hands are down.
Mark,
yeah.
Shouldn't we find out exactly what's going on? Because I'd propose a resolution, but I would withdraw it if I felt that if the DOT is working expeditiously on it. I just don't know.
Colleen, you're playing it close to the vest, and Kimberly, can you give us a little more guidance here?
I mean, you know, I always find that a resolution is strong. Have something in writing if the board wishes to produce one and give that to us with, you know, some of the recommendations that was discussed here tonight or what to look at. Having something in writing is, you know, it's the best approach.
Okay, that's very helpful.
It is indeed. Susan, just one sec. I will turn to you. But what troubles me about this is while we have, for instance, raised the question of flashing yellow lights, I think by no means do we have any kind of consensus or even strong expressed view that that's something we're affirmatively asking for. I mean, all I can tell we're asking for now is a study and not any real specifics. And does that, you know, if people want to do that, we can do it. But I have not understood this conversation that to have any kind of anything like a consensus asking for any particular specific change.
Could I ask a question, please?
Who is that?
Andrew.
Yeah.
Those that are suggesting the flashing yellow lights, would they be activated by a pedestrian pushing a crossing button? Is that how they get turned on and they're off at all other times?
I think what we were talking about, it's flashing yellow on the drives, which is overridden by pedestrians pressing a walk light that would turn the light on the drive red and the pedestrian would get a green.
So the pedestrians would turn the flashing yellows to red?
That's right, assuming that anybody did that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so what do we want to do?
I just think that.
Let's get, I'm sorry, Ken.
Yeah,
let me
I think we need to hear from a few more people, but we need to wrap. If we're going to have a thoughtful discussion on the next item, we're going to need to move.
We do, but Susan has had her hand up, so let's hear quickly from Susan, then Ken, and we'll try to figure out if we're going to try to do resolution.
And Rich Robbins has his hand up too.
All right, Susan, Ken, Rich.
I mean,
On the question of do we do a resolution?
I was hesitating to weigh in because I'm going to take up a lot of time later in the meeting probably. My feeling is the board really put a lot of time and effort into the resolution about the enforcement of the traffic lights and the traffic regulations. And it seems it passed almost 3-1 at our last full board meeting. And I have to say, I'm troubled to think that we would then turn around and give a different message, that we would want to change the regulations and change the traffic. We heard loud and clear that people are concerned that the cyclists are not stopping, and the vehicles, frankly, are not stopping for the red lights. So to change the red lights to yellow flashing lights seems like really the wrong direction to go in. I'm cheered to hear that DOT is working on this. What I would suggest is a compromise, which is not my strong suit, frankly, is that we take this rolling thunder of a great discussion back to committee and keep it a committee and have a really good, fruitful discussion at the next transportation committee meeting with parks in attendance.
Ken, what did you want to say on this, and then Rich?
I think we all are in agreement that what's going on now is not working. And I think it would be...
No, we're not, Ken. We're not all in agreement. No.
Okay, well, many of the people I've heard talk have expressed that what's happening now is not working. And I think, all this resolution would do, and I'm very much in favor of offering one, is not going into the particulars, whether it's flashing yellow or keeping the red or whatever, just simply asking the officials, whether they're DOT, Conservancy, or DPR, to rethink the use of the signals in the park and the number of signals. And also, we've heard a lot about the moving lane, the car lane, and rethink that.
Ken, let me ask you, because that is vaguely sounding like some wording for a resolution. Would evaluate do as well as rethink? Rethink has the connotation of make some changes. I don't think we're there that specifically with, many of us might individually be, but I don't think we're there. But I think where we are mostly is a request to evaluate the traffic signaling system in light of the lack of cars, the fact that it's been automated. I mean, I could go there, but I personally don't think I would go further.
I would take one step. I was very clear, Clara. I would take one step back. I would ask for an evaluation of the current use of the drive and to propose a plan that would increase safety and usage for both pedestrians and cyclists, and let them figure it out. I wouldn't be beholden to a system that was put in for motor vehicles in the 1960s. I would just, again, I'm not an expert. There are experts on we pay our taxes for. I want to hear what they would have to say.
Did you really mean increase safety and usage, like have more pedestrians and more cyclists?
No, to increase safety and the experience for both.
Oh, experience. I heard you say.
Right.
The safety experience, or okay.
Yes, safety is critical. It's critical for cyclists and pedestrians. Okay. And to think that there has to be a way, then some vestigial system that was implemented for cars, there has to be a better way to improve so the experience for both cyclists and pedestrians. And to Susan's point, the fact that it's not working motivated that resolution last time. We have to come up with the last resolution was motivated by an interest in improving the situation. This is a request for a study that could come up with the optimal situation that works best for everyone.
I think Irena Clary has a question.
Oh yes, Irena. She got her physical hand up there. Hi, Irena.
Yeah, thank you. I wondered whether it might be more effective to write a letter rather than a resolution, since we haven't all agreed on what it is we'd like to see. We know we want improvement on the drives, but we don't know what that's going to look like yet. And one of the reasons we don't know that is in part because we're still waiting for the outcome of the Department of Transportation's study. So perhaps it's a letter to DOT asking them to provide us with the information on their study, determine if their study encompasses all the issues that were raised here this evening, and then if they're not being considered as part of the DOT study, then recommend specific things we'd like them to also evaluate. And then once we get the findings of their study, we can pass a resolution with specific recommendations on how to improve safety on the drives. But I'm eager to know what DOT is studying, whether it encompasses, as I say, all the issues everyone's raised this evening, and if not, whether they can broaden it to include those. I think a resolution is premature.
Irina, a couple things about that. One is we really, in order to take action for the board, typically we need to do it by resolution. But the other part of it that troubles me is if DOT is really doing a study now, and we've heard that they are, it's troublesome to me. They're not telling us what they're studying. And
well, that's why I think we should ask them specifically what they're evaluating. And then again, if the scope doesn't include everything we think they should be evaluating, ask them to expand it and copy the borough president and copy our council members and see what they say. I think Colleen and Kimberly are here. I mean, I think they'll be amenable to giving us more information if we requested it.
I would not count on that, but
Well,
Mark,
Lori, what I'm hearing, if I could just chime in, what I'm hearing from a lot of board members is they'd like to see more information and data before they can vote on this or vote on anything. And if we're not going to hear from the transportation team tonight on a concrete plan, I would hope that we would, again, do a letter, push the issue, but I think presuming we can do a resolution at this point on this without proper information is going to be tough. And I know there are people who disagree with that and want this to move forward. Roberta, I know you have been raising your hand for a long time, so I want to make sure you haven't spoken yet. Rich?
Roberta's hand up.
Roberta hasn't spoken yet, so we're going to call on her first. Okay.
Can I respond on the DOT questions, or is that, should I
I
not?
think we'd love to hear from DOT, but maybe if we could just hear from Roberta first, since she's had her hand up for a long time.
What?
So I think it's a big problem. And I think, you know, many people are obeying the laws and many people aren't. And it's important that we, you know, I think the problem with Central Park is that the roadway was developed for cars. And now we have said that it's only for bicycles and pedestrians. And I think we need to create a new process to create a better program where bikes know where they need to be and cars and pedestrians need to know where they need to be. The cars that are driven on the path are mostly DOT or Parks Department. They are very careful to protect the pedestrians and the bike riders. But the bike riders and the pedestrians don't always know what they need, where they need to be. And I think we need to have a program where it is determined that bikes are in certain areas and pedestrians are in certain areas, and the police, the DOT, the other vehicles that need to be in the park are within where they need to be. And I think that will improve the safety tremendously. Right now, it is a free-for-all, and I don't think it works.
Well, thanks, Roberta. Let's go back to what we're trying to get to the end of here, which is whether, because we got a lot to go, whether we have a resolution tonight asking for something, and if the asking is so general, whether it's worth having a resolution, which has all sorts of sort of.
And Clary, I just would ask that we have Kimberly, who I think has been wanting to comment from the DO, just so that we I think she was trying to chime in earlier. I think she can advise us all
Absolutely.
on some of this.
That would be
And then
very
Rich,
helpful.
I know
put
you've
the
been
hand
wanting to
up.
talk too, but I think Kimberly can give us some straight talk on what we're trying to
That would be
achieve tonight.
wonderful. I don't see Kimberly's hand up, but please do.
I don't have my hand up, sorry. But I just wanted to clarify that, as Colleen mentioned before, we started conversations with the Conservancy, but we have not yet initiated a study. So those were conversations that we had earlier this year. And as Mark pointed out earlier, or just a moment ago, COVID has impacted our workload and our priorities and those things. So it's not started. So I don't want you to think that we're working on something that we're not willing to share. It's that we have started conversations about it, but we don't actually have a study that has been initiated at this point. So if there's, it seems like it makes sense for you guys to give us suggestions or requests about what you think is important to see in that study.
Okay.
So that
Kimberly, would to do a study, does that require special allocated funding? Is there a process that has to go through to be able to even do this study? Or could you turn around tomorrow and say, hey, COVID's over, or for whatever, we're all back in our offices, or we're working from home, tomorrow we're starting the study?
my understanding, I mean, it depends. So some studies we do internally and some we hire consultants for. So that may determine the funding needs and the timing. And that generally depends on a number of factors, including like our resources and our ability to focus and how extensive the study needs to be. So it may be that in this case, we do need to look at funding and external consultants and that sort of thing.
It's Colleen. I just want to add one last quick comment. When we met with the Conservancy before COVID, we understand, and I think we all agreed that, you know, the current design is not working and that we do need to make changes with it. And we did talk about the signals and, you know, whether 47 is needed, it's possible 47 may not be needed. So, I mean, we haven't initiated a study, but we understand that something needs to be done. And with this particular, you know, request that the board is asking us, I'm sure that we're going to need external or outside funding for if we were going to move forward with a study.
Colleen, the conversation you've had with Conservancy and the study, if there were to be a study, is it about essentially the signaling, or is it a broader set of questions that you've talked about so far and would look to study?
It's broader. It's the signaling, it's pedestrian and cyclists, keeping them in a separate path so that there are no conflicts. It's more broad. Yeah.
I don't understand that. One's red, one's green.
You know, the conversations about even in tonight's conversation, the topic was crossings, but lots of questions talked about the lanes, who stays in what lane, vehicle lanes, vehicles going in. These are not necessarily issues that can be separated.
Yeah, yeah.
Conversation, I mean, I think DOT deserves, they're certainly not the DOT of, you know, 3 decades ago. They have an interest in trying to analyze and understand use patterns to make the situation as best as it possibly can. And that was the nature of the discussions. Are there opportunities with striping or signaling in the relationship between those that could potentially improve the situation?
Mark, what do you think we should do?
Well, first of all, I think you should call on Rich because he's had his hand up a long time.
Right.
And then I'll be glad to answer your question.
Rich, then
So I think we need to be really thoughtful about what we're trying to do here. And the problem we're trying to address is not traffic lights any more than it was enforcement. The problem is that there are conflicts between pedestrians and bicycles. And it's not safe for either, and especially not for pedestrians. And we're not going to get anywhere if we do this piecemeal, calling for enforcement at one meeting, traffic lights at another. I think Chris and Hindi both nailed it. Right now, it's not working for anyone. And what Chris said is brilliant, which is we need to change the culture. We need to get it so that it works. And we need to address this issue holistically. And that's what the study should be. And that's what the resolution should be, is how do we address the problem? And the problem is that the park is dangerous, especially for pedestrians. Right now, the culture really encourages cyclists to break the law. yeah, having cyclists stop at a number of lights and wait for a minute or two when no one's nearby, and dodging pedestrians even when cyclists do have the light, and having roadways that feel like they're designed for cars all send a signal to cyclists that the lights are meant to be ignored.
And those are all points that we've heard before tonight. Mark, what's your thought to get beyond this item tonight in the way that makes most sense?
I don't hear a consensus toward any one resolution. I hear
don't
an
either.
awful lot of very good ideas that are not, that in my personal estimation, any one of them could be a resolution, but I don't think we're there. So I think this is something that ought to be continued as a discussion in
Could I
another
just finish
form.
what I was saying, which is I think we should have a resolution calling for a study that looks at the issue of unsafety for park users, especially of pedestrians, looks at it holistically, and figures out how all of these different elements fit in to create a safer Central Park for all users and especially pedestrians.
I don't think we have a consensus towards that. I don't think I would vote for that tonight, actually.
But I don't think it matters who's voting for what. I think it's, do we have something that's ready to put on the table and discuss tonight? It's already well into 1 hour and 45 minutes of this discussion. We have another major item on the table tonight that needs discussed from the Parks and Environment Committee.
And yet another one as well.
Yeah. So I would just recommend, if we don't have consensus, unless there's something somebody wants to present tonight in terms of a resolution, that I just think we need to put this on the docket for July.
Whose docket?
Transportation.
Well, I could say for transportation, I implore Meg to chime in. I would like more information, and that was, I think, the whole point of the resolution. I'm not a traffic engineer. Maybe I know a lot less than most people, but I'm just being candid. I just would like to have the experts that we spend our tax dollars on to weigh in. I think it would be useful.
Howard, my concern about, I mean, everybody's got different concerns and they overlap, but you know, we could have a resolution asking for a study, and 2 or 3 years later, they haven't even started a study. They haven't authorized a study. I think there may be better ways to keep this conversation going than to send them a piece of paper saying, we hope you'll have a study.
Well,
I get the sense
of my expertise here.
Yeah.
So
I get the sense that things are happening and are going to continue to happen when COVID gets a little less. It is already getting a little less rampant. And I am concerned that we be most involved in that ongoing discussion as opposed to, you know, do a study sometime that they may or may not do, and they get it done and then they come back and tell us something. I mean, this is right now that people are running each other over here.
Well, I think there's an assumption that there's some kind of big study that's multi-year and big and expensive that's being proposed. I would just like to hear from them in some more formal way. They haven't said anything substantive tonight, to just prepare some kind of response to us on what their ideas are for.
So, Howard, why can't we get their commitment that they'll do that for your July?
That's exactly what I'm going for.
Yeah, why can't we just get their commitment of everyone on the call right now, and we can move on and have it be a discussion that turns into a resolution for the July meeting of the Transportation Committee.
Colleen and Kimberly, if we put this on the July Transportation Committee agenda joint with the Parks Committee, would you have anything more to tell us? We've asked, you know, some specific questions and some general, very strong general concerns. Is there more that you'd be able to tell us in July?
I mean, I think the issue is that we need to do more study to be able to make recommendations and to tell you what we think is feasible for us to do. So I don't know that in a couple of months from now, we would have more information about that. It seems unlikely.
Do you think
if there's very specific questions that we can get the answers for, we're happy to do that and get back to you. But I'm not sure that we'll have a presentation that will provide the level of like potential feasible options that you might be looking for.
If I could interject, following up on what Kimberly just said, while we would absolutely need a resolution in order to do a letter that advocates for a position on behalf of the board, I do not think we need a resolution in order to ask factual questions. So if there are factual questions that folks want answers to in advance of I'm going to take Elizabeth's suggestion of the July Transportation Committee meeting or wherever the next venue is, then we can do that. And I will work with the chairs of both committees to make sure that those questions are the ones you want to ask. But they need to be factual questions, not why shouldn't we do it this way?
Mark, is there any reason why people could not put this in chat and they could ask their questions and we could, just so that we have a heads up and the folks could start working on it now, so that before the July meeting, they could.
So the answer is yes, that would work. And I agree with Elizabeth that it's 8:18 and it's time to get on to our next agenda item. And so I strongly urge you to use that approach. That will answer Colleen's remark a few minutes ago, that having something to respond to is always useful in terms of moving a discussion. And it gives you something, some tangible result of this meeting, although perhaps not what everybody was hoping would come out of it.
Just a logistical question: how do we, if we want to think through what our question is, how should we communicate it? Should we email Colleen? Should we email you directly?
No, I think we should email the 4 co-chairs and Mark.
Email Mark. Why not put it in chat, everyone? Why not make this a true
Because
public?
some of us want to give some thought and work on the questions and
But
not,
I mean, to hear from the community who is here tonight.
But I'm saying for community board members, or if people don't want to give some thought.
I think that's fine. I'm happy with that.
How should they
I think both work. If folks want to email me or the chairs, that's great. Put it in chat, that's great too. But let's move on. This has been a great discussion, but we're not ready to vote on anything, so let's go.
I think that's right.
Okay, so our next item on the agenda, just so folks know.
So let me just thank folks for participating in this one.
Yes.
And this is the end of the joint. Obviously everybody is welcome and encouraged to stay, but I thank all the transportation members who took this time to be with us. Now, Elizabeth, I'm sorry to have interrupted. Please go ahead.
No interruption at all. I just, again, thanks to everyone. And we hope people will stay. This is going to be, I think, hopefully an impactful conversation that we have. So again, I wanted just to relay to folks, the next item on the agenda is really looking at a Parks and Environment resolution related to an item that we have been discussing for a long time now on this committee over the years, and in particular in recent months, related to dog leash and other dog rules compliance in Central Park. Before we do that, I just wanted to remark on a comment that somebody said earlier in this call about Central Park being our parks being parks for everyone and a city for everyone. And I would just like everyone to take a moment and think about some of the events of recent weeks. I know we have been dealing with George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks over the weekend, who didn't have a city for everyone, and just would hope that we would be thinking of equity and fairness in our decisions as a board and a community as we go forward. I also want to acknowledge, I believe it's Asha Harris or Edwin Rodriguez from Parks Enforcement who are here tonight. I don't know if they're both on the call or if one of them is, but they are here to be a part of this conversation. The reason
Can we just find out, Elizabeth, it's Asha Harris, isn't it, who's with us?
I think it's Asha or Edwin.
It was.
I think Edwin might be on in her stead right now.
I don't know. Can we find out?
He is here. Edwin is here.
Oh, great. Fantastic. So,
yeah, so
Edwin and Asha, are you both still with us? And are you you're both from PEP, is that right? Are they on mute?
I'm sending them to panelists.
Good.
So again, and we have a couple of speakers tonight who have been very vocal and interested in talking about this at previous meetings, and we want to make sure they have an opportunity to voice their opinion on this. I think the Parks and Environment Committee, and I think the board, is very interested, as we did last month and as we did just in our previous conversation, in focusing on enforcement of the rules in Central Park. So one of the big rules that we have been focused on deals with dog leash off hours. I think everyone, and Mark, I don't know if you can share the screen, or if Susan, you'd like to share it, of the Central Park Conservancy that has shared what the rules are for dogs in Central Park. That really forms the basis of the discussion tonight. And this is really a resolution that has come from one of our committee members who would like to present it and talk about it. and we'll do that in a second. But again, just the context is really not just the events of the last couple of weeks, but the events of the last number of years. I can speak myself as a dog owner who keeps my dog on leash all the time and follows the rules. I believe very strongly in leash enforcement in Central Park, and that is what this resolution is about. And again, in the spirit of enforcement and safety, that is why we're presenting it tonight for folks to consider and then potentially vote on, depending on the strength of the resolution. So with that in mind, I don't know, Susan, if you'd like me to turn it over to you. Susan Schwartz has presented it as one of our committee members, or Clary, if you'd like to add anything.
Yeah, let me just add just real briefly, and then I think we will, of course, want to call on Susan first. We typically, at least in this committee, don't start out with proposed resolutions in writing, but there's no reason we can't. And Susan has proposed one tonight. We put this item on the agenda tonight at the urging of Susan, but Elizabeth and I, in consultation with Mark, we thought it was an appropriate topic of discussion. So Susan does have a resolution, and she will speak first, a proposed resolution. Elizabeth and I will speak. We are not proponent. I mean, we may or may not vote for it, but we are not offering the resolution as a committee resolution at this time. We'll participate in the debate like all other committee and board members do. But that's how it got here, and it's certainly a topic of sort of increasing publicity, certainly. And so I'm with you, Elizabeth, on turning it over to Susan for a couple minutes to sort of introduce the topic or proceed with the topic and with her proposed resolution.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to a number of the members of the committee who have helped work on the resolution. It's not just from me, but more importantly, we have Chris Cooper here with us tonight. And I want to brag that I met Chris back in March. I'd like to call him a friend. He can argue in a minute if when he gets on. But he's a fellow bird watcher. And we are going to be losing Chris at about 8:30 because he has to go on to one of his many press junkets. So if I could just turn it over quickly to Chris to talk about this, not about the incident with Amy Cooper per se, but just about the ongoing struggle to keep the peace between the various park users. There's this, for a long time, there's been a conflict between the dog owners and the bird watching population, the rest of the population in the park. And if I could just turn it over to Chris, if he's there, if he's unmuted, if he wants to talk about this resolution, because when I first met him, I said to him, you should come to Community Board 7 and you should talk about this because you know it better than I do. So Chris, you want to talk?
Wait, hold on a second. First of all, we'd like to have Mark put Susan's draft resolution on the screen at some time soon.
Well, the resolution, Clary, if I could just interrupt, the resolution is really straightforward. It simply says there are really pretty straightforward rules that DPR has come up with. And the basic idea here is they urge dog owners to be safe, obey the rules, respect the park and all others. And the rules basically are real quick. From 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
No, Susan, stop, because we already saw the rules that you had up a moment ago. But if we are going to be talking about a proposed resolution, we need to see it. It's also not our normal practice to call on members of the community until we've heard board members. Elizabeth, though, and Elizabeth is more running this, if you're amenable to hearing from Chris for a couple of minutes as part of Susan's time, it's okay with me.
I am fine. I think it would be great to have Christian talk for a couple of minutes related to the resolution that's on the agenda.
If nothing else, give him a chance to say we're not really friends. Chris, want to talk?
I first of all, apologies. I had no intention of coming here and violating your normal protocols.
No, it's fine. Just speak.
The only thing I have to say to my friend Susan and to the entire committee, first of all, thank you for considering Susan's proposal. I think it's long overdue. I want to voice my full support for it 100%. This is not about a race issue. I mean, it became about a race issue in this particular instance. But what it really was, up until that moment, was a conflict between a birder and a dog walker. And we've seen that way too much in the park. And the conflict would never have happened if there had only been some regular enforcement up until that point. So that's what we're asking for. That's what we've been asking for a long time. I won't belabor it. The meeting's already gone on a long time. Susan can advocate for this better than I ever could. I just wanted to make my voice heard on this in support of Susan 100%. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris, for doing that. And we really appreciate you joining us tonight. I know you've been very busy, and we obviously support what you've been going through and are thinking of you. And, you know, I think this issue, given that you joined us even before the incident on Memorial Day, shows and speaks to your commitment to an issue of just enforcing the issue, you know, the laws in Central Park. And I think we all care about enforcement, and all of us have different reasons for enforcing it. So we appreciate you, and thank you for taking time out for the board tonight. So I guess back to Susan first, just to present the resolution, and then we can talk as a, you know, as a committee. I agree with Arena and several others that this item, you know, the items ran over tonight. We want to make sure that we get everyone a chance to speak tonight on an issue that's very important for a lot of different people. So.
Thanks very much, guys. Well, first off, I want to say one important thing. I really love dogs. My husband and I have dog babysat for a number of our friends' dogs over the weekends for years and years. So I'm not a dog not person. Okay, just wanted to get that out there. The resolution is based on the fact that Central Park, all 843 acres of it, is a shared resource. And there are approximately, of the people who go to the park, there are 42 million users, and only 14% of them are first-time visitors. So people who go to the park really know the park and know what the rules are. And the rules are really well signed, and they're out there. There's about 17% of the park that is regulated with dog usage. So the rest of the park, it's something like 700 acres of the 843. And my numbers could be off, but I've done some research on this. About 700 acres, the dogs can do a lot of stuff, but there are these protected areas that are really important to respect and to protect. And also it's important to respect the other users of the park, because not everybody likes dogs. Not everybody wants a Great Dane come running at you off the leash in the middle of the day. So all this resolution is asking for is a very straightforward thing to give some sort of support and encouragement for the regulations that are already in place to encourage compliance. That's really all it is.
So I guess with that in mind, we're happy to take questions from, again, I feel very strongly, I may differ from Clara on this, but I feel strongly we hear from the community members who are here tonight who have given up a lot of their evening already. So if there's anyone from the community who would like to speak, I'm happy to call on you, or Clara is, as provided you will be patient with us on our Zoom, counting on you. So, and if not, happy to include anyone from the board who'd like to speak. I see a couple folks from the board, and I'm just looking at the participants list right now.
I don't see attendees with their hands up, but if there are any, Elizabeth, it's fine for me to call on them first. I just don't see any.
I see Molly Adams, who I'm going to allow to talk right now.
Oh yeah, I see her.
Do you guys want the resolution text to be put up on the screen now or later?
I think that would be great. And in the meantime, Molly, if you'd like to speak, we would love to have you.
Molly Green.
Molly Adams.
Oh, Molly Adams. Okay.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you. So hi, my name is Molly Adams. I'm the Advocacy and Outreach Manager for New York City Audubon, and we're a science-based conservation organization representing 10,000 Audubon members across New York City and thousands more who support our mission to protect 350 plus bird species, which is almost a third of all species in North America that live in or pass through New York City each year. So Chris Cooper, who you all just heard from, is one of New York City Audubon's beloved board members. We are really, of course, repulsed by the incident, the racist attack that happened to him, and even more so upset because he was going through our mission. He was advocating for safer habitats for birds and people in the city. So we, of course, applaud the grace at which he handled the situation and are dedicated to preventing any future incidents like this from happening in our city's parks. This means our communities need to start following the leash laws, creating a safer place for both people and birds. It's important for us that community members understand the importance of keeping their dogs on leashes to protect people, other dogs, birds, and other wildlife and local habitat. So we support Susan's resolution, but also ask that Community Board 7 leaders will support our ask for an increase in the overall New York City budget for New York City park safety, and that the Parks Department apply resources and assign urban park rangers and Parks Enforcement Patrol officers strategically as stewards to remind park goers with pets of the rules regarding off-leash dogs, and to issue citations and fines when necessary. Beyond sensitive areas like Strawberry Fields, the Ramble, and the Northwoods and Central Park, attention is needed in many other places in the 5 boroughs, but we understand that you're all committed to Central Park, and we really appreciate that. So thank you so much for allowing me to share my thoughts, and we look forward to working together to support making city parks safer for people and birds.
Thank you, Molly. I don't see any other attendees with their hands up.
Elizabeth?
Clary, if I could just, there are 3 panelists from the board. So unless there's something urgent, Clary, I'd like to go to them.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, I don't know if it's urgent, but what I think would really be helpful for us before we board members speak, and I will be one of those when we do, we've got 2 people here from PEP, at least I think we still have 2, Edwin and Asha. I think it would be helpful if they could explain to us who has responsibility for enforcement of the dog leash laws. Is it entirely PEP officers who are a part of the Parks Department, or is it also the precinct?
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, and we would love to hear, Edwin, if you're on the line, or if anyone is still on the line from PEP. That's an important piece of tonight's conversation before we vote on anything. Are you still there? We're happy to unmute you if you are.
Is Edwin there?
Edwin is now a panelist, so he should be able to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hey, Edwin.
Yeah, hi, Edwin.
Not a great connection. Oh, maybe better now.
Can you hear me now?
Edwin, I think you have 2 devices going at once. You need to mute one of them.
Edwin, can you hear us?
Edwin, now you're muted entirely.
Yeah, we'd really like to hear from you if you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Bit of an
Now,
echo.
can you hear me?
Yes.
I had you guys before.
Now we can. Yes?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead. Edwin, you're good. Go ahead.
Edwin, are you still there?
Edwin is definitely there, and I can see him, and he's unmuted. So
Yeah, we can see him, but
now?
Can you hear us?
yes, perfect.
great, thank you.
Sorry
Hi.
about that.
Yeah, very sorry. It's the responsibility of the Park Enforcement Patrol officers to issue citations regarding unleashed dogs.
So Edwin, then the precinct, the New York City Police Department officers in the precinct do not have dog leash enforcement responsibilities. It's just PEP is what you're saying. Is that right?
No, the NYPD can issue unleashed dog summons too, but they don't write the Oak summons like we do. They will issue the criminal court summons. So they leave the summons writing to us. The police department has authority to write any summonses in New York City.
Right.
But we enforce the leash dog law.
So I'm sorry, I think my question is becoming more complicated than I thought it was, but in Central Park, to the extent anybody, either you or the police, do enforce the leash laws, is it in the effectively 100% of whatever enforcement there is done by PEP? Or do the police actually also, to some extent, any extent, enforce the leash laws in Central Park?
It's mainly done by PEP.
Okay, thanks, that helps to know.
Yeah, that's really important, I think, as we craft out a resolution tonight, any resolution we may or may not do. I don't know if there's any other for board members or for any community members, if there's an interest, we'd like to hear from anyone from the enforcement side. Caroline, I know you're still on the call. If you have thoughts, Arena, I will turn to you because I know you have significant experience with the parks. But if Caroline's on the call, I don't know if she has any thoughts on this or if we need, I'm happy to turn it over to board members, but just wanted to see if there were others who could offer. I've lived in this neighborhood for 27 years. I have a dog. I still am flummoxed all the time about how the laws work in the park related to dogs. I know that I respect the rules and I hope that most people do as well, but a lot of people don't. And I have no idea who enforces them. So this is a useful conversation to have tonight. So if there are folks who can chime in, other than what we've already heard, it would be great to hear from our public servants who are on this call.
So Elizabeth, your question was whether Caroline had anything to add on this sort of factual question.
Yes.
Caroline?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, I don't have a lot to add, but I will say, similar to the discussion about behavior on the drives, a lot of what we encounter has to do with behavior. And I think we have to look at civility, consideration, and the things that are really missing within a portion of the dog community. I agree that especially since the COVID crisis, we have had mostly New Yorkers who really do understand what the rules are. And as was our discussion in, I believe it was April, the last time I participated in a CB7 meeting, right now, the excuse that we get is that the dog runs are closed. And there really is an I don't care. I need my dog to be off leash because the dog runs are closed and I don't care about Central Park. So, I mean, enforcement is just one component of this. My staff go out and address dog owners all the time. And high percentage of the response is, do you give tickets? If not, leave us alone. So it really is boiling down to the exact same element that we were touching upon regarding behavior on the drives.
Thank you. Thanks, Caroline, for that background. I do notice there's one community member and you would have 2 minutes and perhaps a little bit more to speak. Ken Chaya, if you are there, I'm going to allow you to talk and then we're going to turn it over to board discussion, of which there are 5 members. Thanks. Ken? Ken, are you there?
I've just unmuted him.
Yes, I think we both did.
Okay.
Ken, are you still on the line? We're going to give you, are you there?
I'm here.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you for this long needed conversation, everybody. Just to check in, my name is Ken Chaya. I'm an urban naturalist. I'm a longtime birder. I had a dog that I walked in Riverside Park and Central Park for 20 years. I'm currently a member of the Upper West Side Neighborhood Naturalist Group, and I'm the current president of the Linnaean Society of New York. So on the topic of enforcement of leash laws in Central Park, it's never ever been clear to me who is actually responsible for that enforcement, whether it's the Central Park Police Precinct, the Department of Parks and Recreation, Urban Park Rangers, PEP, Central Park Conservancy. Thanks to some of the discussion so far, my understanding is that it's PEPs. So my question is, why are they failing so badly to protect nature and the natural habitat and the safety of our citizens from off-leash dogs and many of their aggressive owners? It would be great news to me to know that all of these agencies I've mentioned are meeting together to discuss this problem and devise a clear solution. The solution should be simple. Issue a summons to everyone who is in violation of the law. Do this and do it every day throughout the park for a period of 2 weeks, especially in all of the wooded areas, since they serve as a fragile space for nature. And you will have sent a clear message that Central Park is not anyone's private dog run. Dogs are welcome in the park, provided that the owners obey the laws. The most recent incident involving Chris Cooper, which reared the ugly head of racism in our community, is unfortunately a direct result of this untreated problem that has in fact been simmering for many decades in Central Park. I've been birding for 30 years in that park. And the problem was there 30 years ago, and it's still there now. And guess what? It seems to be getting worse. I fear that it will continue to get worse and occur with more frequency, resulting in a greater number of unpleasant incidents like this one until consistent measures are put in place and enforced to address those who break the law and refuse to respect the peaceful rights of others.
Thank you, Ken, for your comments. I think we'll move on now to our board members, 5 of which have comments tonight. I'm going to take them in the order which they're coming on my screen, which starts with Doug, Barbara, Natasha, Ken, and then I think Rich. I'm not sure there's one other person, but Doug, Barbara, Natasha, first 3. So Doug, going to you, and I think you're unmuted.
And Elizabeth, I will
Okay,
too, but I'm happy to go last. So go on with as you're going.
Okay,
Doug is
thanks, Elizabeth. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, you're good. Great.
Perfect. So I just wanted to note that I support the resolution as a dog owner, parent of young kids, not often, but sometimes enjoyer of birding, and a regular user of the Ramble and other parts of Central Park. I mean, at its base, I think others have already mentioned this. This is about a culture of following the rules. The different groups don't have to be in conflict with one another if, at a minimum, some of the rules are enforced. In places like the Ramble, where birding is an important feature of Central Park, it would make sense to enforce the rules as written. And again, this is as a board member, but also as a constituent who is wears one of many different hats, and who uses the park with the kids, the dog, and as a birder. So
Thanks, Doug. That's great. Barbara, you're next.
Thank you. So as not to belabor my comments, I just want to second everything that Ken Shia said. I think his comments were absolutely superb. I support this 100%. I'm a relatively new birder. I got some binoculars as a gift. I'm very excited about it. I head to the Ramble quite often. My dream is to meet Chris Cooper there one day. The Ramble, for those of you who don't know, is the most pastoral, wooded, most beautiful place. And you are never there without seeing dogs off leash, their owners yelling at them, the dogs romping around, disturbing the peace. And it just breaks the whole ambiance of this most magnificent part of the park. So.
Thanks, Barbara.
Yeah.
So Natasha, you're next.
Hi, I just had a follow-up to a comment that was made earlier about the dog runs. I know that this came up in our last meeting as well. A lot of members of the community were complaining about the dog runs being closed, and I was wondering if Clary or Elizabeth, you have any update on that, on the dog runs being reopened anytime soon?
Well, I think some of our colleagues is Riverside on the call? I think somebody.
Yeah, because there are no dog runs in Central Park. So
yeah, Jeff is on the call.
So
he can give a quick update from our last meeting.
Yeah, Matt Genrich and particularly Jeff Martin, do you have any update on Riverside? Any target date that you can share with us?
Thanks for that question. No, right now there is nothing that I'm being told as a target date for reopening anything at this point. It's still all up in the air, and I wish I knew, but I don't have any information.
Jeff, I think what you told us last time is that this is citywide, that it comes from the mayor and the Parks Commissioner. It's not a Riverside decision. If Central Park had dog runs, it wouldn't be a Central Park decision. It's you wait to hear from.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Clary, do we want to go to Matt, and then I have a comment on that. Matt, do you have anything to add, or are you?
No, I don't have anything else to add, but that would be, this decision comes from the mayor.
Sure.
Along with all of our other closures. So as soon as, decisions are made through what will open through different phases of COVID, then we will take that appropriate action. And that's, park throughout the city, no matter what borough you're in.
Yeah, and again, when we talked on our previous item, we talked a lot about data. I know that there have been some suggestions that the reason there have been more incidents in the Ramble and in other places in Central Park have been because of the lack of dog runs being opened in other parts of the neighborhood. I don't want to agree or disagree with that because I don't have any statistical evidence to back up one way or another on that. So I think it's very important that we don't try to assume causality based on dog runs being closed, that it automatically assumes that all these incidents are happening in Central Park. I think a lot of these incidents in Central Park were happening before COVID and are happening now. And the point of tonight is to address it. Obviously knowing that there are a lot of dogs in Central Park at any time of the year, in any situation, and we want to encourage enforcement, which is the spirit in which the resolution was intended. So I hope that's clear. So I think the next couple of questions, Ken, Rich, Arena.
Oh, Ken, you're not, Ken's mute.
No, I'm unmuting him, or
Okay, I just think I did.
I think I've muted you, Ken.
Sorry,
Yeah. Ken, you should be able to unmute yourself. I think he can be unmuted. I don't know where he went.
I don't know where he went either. I was just trying to unmute him again.
Okay, Clara, do you want to, I don't think both of us should do this, and I was going to be running this part of the
Oh, no,
meeting.
that's fine. With me.
So I think Rich, I think you are unmuted.
Yeah, so 2 quick points. One is in terms of enforcement, I do think we should be sensitive unless there are real strong reasons that the PD should be doing enforcement. I think the resolution should be specific, calling for PEP and not the police to be doing enforcement. The second thing is, and I'm not a dog owner, so I don't know, but does the lack of dog runs in Riverside Park have more people going to Central Park? And if so, should the resolution call for the opening of dog runs?
Rich, you might have missed my comment earlier, but that's exactly what I asked about, and we do not know. So we do not know, and I do not think.
So either way, I might say that the resolution should call for opening of dog runs. It seems from the science we know that being outdoors in a big park is not a
Yeah,
huge
Rich,
issue.
that's not the scope of tonight's conversation for this resolution. So I mean, Doug, I know you've been involved in this, and if you have reaction or comments, I know you've thought about this as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, Elizabeth, this is Doug. So, Rich, I've been a big advocate for considering and asking for a resolution regarding opening the dog runs. And after considerable conversation with our vice chairs, as well as a few others, and then also just thinking through the issue, it's clear that the resolution that Susan is putting forth is a very specific resolution related to current rules on the books for Central Park. And to conflate the two, I think takes us away from the issue at hand.
All right. In which case, I haven't seen the resolution, but I think it should be specific to PEP unless there's a real strong reason that the PD needs to be involved.
I think it would be helpful to see it back on the screen as we continue our discussion, if Mark could do that at some point.
and I know now we're waiting for Arena. If you'd like to, I know you've been waiting and your hand is raised. So Arena. I think, let's see. Hopefully you're unmuted.
I just have a couple of questions for Edwin. Edwin, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Edwin, how many PEP officers are assigned to Central Park, and is that and are they assigned just to Central Park, or are they reallocated depending on what's going on in the city?
We currently have 2 units, which is 4 officers on each tour. So from 8 to 4, you'll have 4 officers. And then on the late shift, you have another 4 officers. But it doesn't mean they won't be pulled out. If we have an emergency or there's a condition nearby, they will leave the park.
And those 4 officers, are they assigned by Is there a specific zone they're assigned to, or do they move about? How are they deployed?
They move about the park.
They move about, okay.
Normally we'll keep a unit in the south end of the park and the other one in the north.
When you say unit, you mean 2 people?
Yes, a mobile unit. 2
Okay.
people will be inside a vehicle. We also have the mounted unit that's assigned to the park.
And how many officers?
The mounted unit will put out 2 horses out daily.
Okay, and what happens to the park rangers?
The park rangers can also issue summonses, but I can't speak for the rangers as that's a different division.
And do you know how many rangers are assigned to Central Park?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Due to COVID, I couldn't give you that answer because I'm not 100% sure if they've been redeployed to other parks.
I see. I wonder whether, as we consider the resolution, we might also consider hours when there seems to be more dogs off leash in protected areas, so that given the fact that the park, as large as it is, only has 4 PEP officers on a shift, and realistically, given everything that's happening with the city budget, we're not going to get more PEP officers. I think perhaps if Suzanne would consider a friendly amendment to really target the PEP officers that we have in the park to specific times when we think that that dog owners will be walking their dogs off the leash in those protected areas.
Yeah, that'd be great, Irena. I mean, but the other thing is, I've noticed from my time in the park, which is considerable, I seem not to have a job anymore, that even the Central Park Conservancy workers, the volunteers and the actual workers, they have tremendous impact on the dog owners. If a Conservancy park worker says, excuse me, sir, your dog's supposed to be on a leash, oftentimes they listen to that and they put the dog on a leash. What I'm hoping to do by advocating enforcement is that it takes it out of the hands of the park users to try to adjudicate among themselves. And that's where you get the real risk and the real danger. And that's where you get the situation where somebody like Chris is at real risk of, it escalating into a very, very dangerous situation. So I'd be totally amenable to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I also don't think we want to put Conservancy staff in that position. Yes, they will do it because they see that as part of their stewardship role, but they're really not enforcement. So
they can't give summonses unless that. I'm just saying, like any sort of part time where somebody who's in an official position says, these are the rules, just want to let you know, please do this. It's an improvement over the park users doing it to each other.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, excuse me, I do want to speak on this, and I'm happy to wait till you've called up.
Yeah, and I'm just conscious of times. If I could just ask everyone before, Clara, we go to you.
No. Just the reason I said anything at all now is I do want to, when I speak, I want to partly address what Irena just said in this issue of timing and how the resolution addresses that before any amendment goes into it. So I would like to.
Yeah, I would just encourage people to read through what was cut and pasted into this resolution is what is on the Conservancy website. I think there are a number of issues going on here. I think the vast majority of parks users who have dogs play by the rules. We want to encourage them to play by the rules and use the rules. What we don't want is for them to disobey the rules in the areas that are listed in the resolution, which are the areas that are clearly areas that are either off leash during certain hours or on leash at all times or on leash during most hours. And that's something that I think the spirit of this resolution, a lot of us did not know about. We hadn't read, people haven't read. It's an important thing for everyone, whether you have a dog or not, to understand and to know. And right now, what we are talking about is not, disciplining people for having dogs off leash during the designated hours and the designated places they are allowed to do that if they are doing it responsibly and legally. And I want to make that very clear because it is an important thing in this city. People have dogs. Until those rules are changed, which we are not discussing tonight, people with dogs have a right and enjoy the opportunity to recreate with their dogs during the legal hours in the legal spaces in Central Park. They're allowed to do so. It's when they do not do it and they flagrantly do not do it that we're talking about tonight. So just want to make that really clear.
Am I going to get a chance to speak?
Yes, Ken, we'll have you speak and then Clary will go afterwards.
Okay. Thank you, Irena, for those questions. We have a situation where we have a 840 acre park and we have 4 PEP officers who have to patrol the whole thing at any one time. I think we're once again, the spirit of this resolution is fairly punitive. And we're calling for enforcement. And we're asking 4 people patrolling 840 acres to enforce something that we want to have enforced. As we know, the law is a very blunt instrument and it can be used very selectively. And that can create great danger for some people. And I liked what the Audubon woman said, where she said, let's remind people what the rules are first. And I think that's what this resolution should say. First, we remind people, and then, where necessary, issue a citation. But I would not be in favor of something that uses the blunt instrument of the law especially at this time.
Well, Ken, can I just say that that's one of the reasons I asked about the rangers, because the rangers are really more education. And I think it's a combination of the two. But remember, there is signage in all of these protected areas that people are selectively deciding to ignore. So I do think at some point, as the word gets out that park enforcement is enforcing the leash law in the protected areas, people will just start to make sure their dogs are on the leash. But I asked about the rangers because it's a softer approach, to your point.
I agree.
So I think we have 2 more. I think, Clary, in addition to you, I'm not trying to make you speak last, but I know Ken has already spoken. Ken has already spoken, Rich has already spoken. So I think, Clary, that leaves you, unless I'm missing any board members who have.
I'm happy to go last. And if there's anybody else before me, that's fine with me too. Mark, I think, does want to talk. I see his hand. Elizabeth, you want to call on Mark first?
Oh, sorry, Mark. I'm going by what's in I realize as you're the chair of the meeting, we can't see we have to look for your physical hand. So please, Mark, go ahead. I think I can unmute you.
Mark, you're muted still.
How about that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Totally.
Yeah. No. When I'm sharing the screen, I can't even raise my hand physically. So, so thank you for this. I am in the same place with this as I was in the last resolution, so I won't take too much of your time because you probably already heard. But especially in the environment we're in, calling for more enforcement, especially in a budgetary situation where we're asking the budget, for example, to reduce the NYPD budget by a significant amount of money, which will then shift enforcement issues that were sometimes handled by the NYPD to other resources, one of which may well be the PEP, that I am not comfortable telling them how to allocate those scarce enforcement resources. And so I'll be abstaining. I have no qualm with the idea that these rules should be followed, but I don't personally think that the board should be telling the PEP officers how to allocate their resources, especially in the absence of data that tells me how many incidents there are and so forth. That's my personal view. So thank you for the chance to share that.
Thanks, Mark. So Clary, I think it's up to you. It's
Yeah, although I
okay.
do, Elizabeth, I do see that Jeff Martin, who runs Riverside Park, his hand is up, but I'm not sure it's intentional that his hand is up. If he has anything that can add on this before I speak, I'm happy to have you call on him, but I don't know whether.
Jeff, it's only 9 o'clock for a Parks and Environment meeting. This is early. So are you?
Can I just remind everyone that you keep referring to dogs off leash? I just want to remind everyone that over the last couple of years, Parks Department has changed a lot of our signage to say pets off leash. It doesn't mean that most people are going to come in with anything but a dog on the leash, but there's an important reason why we've changed it. And that's because a lot of people have come in with what are called service animals. And so I think you should also, if you're going to, put anything in writing, you may want to change that to pets. I know it sounds not that important, but that's sort of what we go by now in the Parks Department. We don't put signs up anymore that say, please, no dogs off leash or anything like that. We all say pets. That's because of that service animal issue. So I just wanted to make that reminder thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. That's a really good point. So I think, Clary, you are our last speaker. Before we
Good. Okay, so I see this as, I come to it from a much broader perspective, certainly than birds. For years, what we have heard and read is that we have effectively no enforcement, both in our parks by PEP officers and in the areas where the police department, police precincts have authority, with what they've called quality of life offenses. They have made it very clear they will not ever enforce the no smoking in the parks laws. We're supposed to figure out how to do that ourselves. They will not enforce the no idling laws. We're supposed to figure out how to do that ourselves. And I think this generally seems to fall in the category of effectively little or no enforcement. I want to ask Edwin a question, because I sent this to you, Edwin, the other day when we invited you to the meeting. Do we have any statistics, Edwin, about 311 incidents, other complaints, how many summonses have been issued, by whom, PEP versus police in Central Park? Do we have any statistics, any data about the size of this issue, the number of complaints? Do we have any recorded facts other than the very genuine anecdotal evidence that we all know?
Yes, I'm sorry I wasn't able to provide you with that.
That's okay. We're just asking you now, Edwin.
But I can provide it. I can send you that data. Also, I just want to let everybody know that Park Enforcement Patrol issues a high volume of summonses for dog-related issues. But it's up to the individual dog owner. We do joint patrol with the rangers. We do patrol the Rambo's area. We do patrol the wooded areas. That's why we have the mounted unit. But we do issue a lot of summonses for dog-related summonses inside Central Park. And I can send you that data.
Well, I think it would be helpful to see that, but I want to just conclude what I want to say. Mark, if you could put the second page of the resolution back on the screen, because this also goes to something Irena was saying. I am I'm going to vote in favor of this resolution, because I think when you read the final clause, it's not asking the precinct or the PEP officers to drop everything and allocate all their resources, or even a lot of their resources, to enforcing dog leash laws. It asks for those who have that authority, and that's those two agencies, working in whatever way these agencies work together, with the Conservancy and DPR in how they manage the park, to allocate collective resources, which I am assuming they would do in a reasonable way. They're not going to drop everything else. They're not going to say this is our highest priority. I think we're just saying that we are increasingly aware, and it's not just, I think, the anecdotal evidence, but of any individual, it's the collective anecdotal evidence, that there are really a fair number of people who are letting their dogs run loose, not just in the Ramble, but in this entire list of other, I guess I'll use my hand that it's not going to show you, a list starting with the Arthur Ross and ending in the Turtle Pond lawn. And I don't think we should be prioritizing them. I'm not basing my own opinion on the Ramble and the birds, as opposed to, you have a set of rules. We all have experiences in some of these areas, but not others, presumably. Maybe some of us have been in every one of these areas in Central Park. But it's a set of rules that have been devised by people who've given thought over the years in managing Central Park, namely DPR and the Conservancy, to where other park users, for whatever reasons they're in the park, should be protected, and the landscape should be protected, and the wildlife should be protected from dogs off leash. That's a reasonable set of rules that seems to have no effective enforcement, notwithstanding Edwin's comments to us right now that some summonses are issued. So I think what Susan has done here, by not asking for just the Ramble and not specifically saying any particular time of day, but entrusting these agencies with the message that we'd like to see some more reasonable amount of enforcement going towards getting people to start complying. And I see it as a park-wide issue. I see it as an issue that is goes beyond this dog leash enforcement, but that's what we have before us tonight. Just as a couple weeks ago we had rules of the road enforcement. So I disagree with Ken. I don't think this is telling the police go out and come heavy-handed, or the PEP be heavy-handed. It's saying be reasonable, and hope that then park users will collectively be reasonable.
Thanks,
So
Clary.
anyway,
Yeah.
I'm going to vote in favor.
Yeah, so I know Madeline wanted to speak, so I want to turn it over to her. I think Madeline, let's see. You are unmuted. You're good.
Okay. My views of this is mixed. I've been frequenting the park for 15 years with my dog. And in the beginning, they sent around a petition, all the dog lovers signed it so that dogs could be off leash from 9 at night to 9 in the morning. However, my views of what you're all talking about are different. There are many owners who have their dogs off leash who are aggressive. My dog's 3 times was attacked. I called the police. They did nothing. They said we can't do anything because dogs are property. So that's my contention with dogs off leash. Now my dog is 15 years old. He's blind, he's deaf. I put him on leash. I still get attacked by aggressive dogs with owners off leash. And I don't see anything being done about it. I think what needs to happen, which I trained my dog from very young, many owners don't train their dogs. It's just, I have a dog and the dog does what it wants to do. I think that's one of the big issues that should be addressed. I've seen several other dogs. This particular one dog has attacked many other dogs in the park. And we tell this gentleman, please do not take your dog off leash. He doesn't care. His wife doesn't care. The police are not going to do anything. So how are you going to be able to enforce what you want to enforce if those things are not addressed?
Madeline, have you ever tried 311 with this particular situation?
You're in the park. Your dog is, wait. You're in the park and your dog is being attacked. When would you have time to call through? I've called 911.
I'm totally with Madeline on this.
And the owner is gone.
I agree with you. No, I just wondered if you'd even tried. I think you're quite right that it's
I think we need to focus this conversation tonight in the interest of time and the interest of trying to get something productive done on what's in the resolution. I think what several of us, Madeline and me included, who have dogs in the park, who we leash all the time, who follow the rules, I think what I want to avoid in this resolution is something that doesn't acknowledge, again, we want to make sure the folks who are abiding by the rules are able to use the park. It's a treasure. It's something we want for our dogs to be able to use, and we use it responsibly. For some of us, that means keeping them on a leash, and in some cases, it means keeping them off, taking them off the leash during the designated legal hours for them to be off leash, and for them to be responsible when they're off leash. If that does not happen, all we're asking is for there to be some additional enforcement. And I think the list on this that has been given is very notable because it shows where, for many of you who don't have dogs, who you should know where there are dogs allowed but must be on leash. So if you see a dog in Cedar Hill, or if you see a dog at the Curbs Boathouse Plaza, that means they're allowed to be there if they're on a leash. And if they're not on a leash, then that's a problem. But I think there's an issue of education and enforcement that needs to happen with this that has not happened during my 25 years of living here and my 15 years of having a dog, as Madeline has in Central Park. And you know, I think we just need to be pushing on this to protect Susan and what she wants, and the birder community, but also the broader community of users of the park who,
Elizabeth, can I just add a couple of things to this, or at least ask Susan to consider a couple of lines in this? You just mentioned education, and I think if we could just add education to the paragraph, so that would encompass the rangers. Also, I wonder whether Susan would be open to rephrasing that last sentence. Lack of enforcement by Central Park Police and PEP has exacerbated conflict among competing park users. Just as you said, you're not sure if the dog runs, the fact that the dog runs are closed due to COVID is the reason for these conflicts. We also don't know if it's because of a lack of enforcement. And so I'm a little concerned about criticizing the two enforcement agencies unless we know exactly that the reason there are these issues is because of is it a lack of education, or is it a lack of enforcement? And do we really need that sentence? And then just in terms of that therefore paragraph, there's a reference to PEP working with CPC and DPR, but PEP is part of DPR. So I think that should be rephrased, or if you're gonna, it could be Manhattan calls on Central Park Police to work together with the Central Park Conservancy and New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, parenthetically, the Rangers and the Park Enforcement Patrol, because PEP is not a separate agency from DPR. And then, as I said, I wonder whether we need to be critical in that last sentence in that dog off leash paragraph, and if we could just add education.
Okay, so first of all, if Arena's not appointed to the Parks and Environment Committee, I think there's just a real injustice in the world, because she should be on the committee. That's the most important thing tonight. I think those are great comments, and I would love to work with you to change this. I think it could be put in a more positive way and not criticizing. I totally agree with all of that. The thing I want to come out of this, and I'm not alone here, is that it's so important to have everyone work together. The signage is throughout the park. I mean, I've seen so many situations where people have just totally disregarded the signage. So the education part, I think CPC has done a really good job already of educating people. The signs are there. But I'm not opposed to putting that in the resolution. I think that's a great idea. I will say, I've seen Chris being interviewed on Oak Bridge a couple times in the last few weeks. I joked with him, it should now be called the Chris Cooper Bridge instead of Oak Bridge. And I've seen people take their dog off leash right beyond the film crew, filming him, talking about this incident. It's just unbelievable. But anyway, I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, I think, Susan, that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about tonight.
No, it's not entirely, because the point is, there's a film crew there. They're talking about dogs off leash, and people yet still have their dogs off leash. Elizabeth,
I agree. But what we're trying to do is get enforcement.
Add something here that says that acknowledges that there are a lot of people who do follow the rules, but that there are people who don't, and that we're asking for is the people who don't to have some enforcement and education. I'm fine with all of that.
Elizabeth, if I could add something. Every time we start to, I mean, with all respect, everybody's good ideas here. And yes, Serena, I hope you'll join our committee. Every time we start potchkeying with resolutions, we end up not knowing what we're voting on. And that's a problem. And I just want to say that one other thing, which is the idea of education. I think that's complete bullshit. I think that people who have their dogs off leash know they're supposed to be on the leash. They don't care. They do it anyway. And I personally don't think that
Sorry,
adding.
I happen to disagree with you. I think there are a lot of
Clary,
people,
when I say
as well.
I think there are a lot of people who come into the park who just don't know.
They don't.
When I say education, I'm referring to the rangers. I
Yeah.
think if you had rangers moving about, just their uniform, just their presence might be a deterrent. And then they can also educate people.
I agree.
So that this, so that it's not always punitive. The sign is there. If there are still rangers in the park, we could use them as well, and perhaps volunteers.
Well, maybe there's the way to get that.
Susan, I would, as the person running this item on the agenda, I would suggest that we put that in as a friendly amendment if it's something that Susan agrees with.
Yeah, but what's the it? We don't have language, and I don't know what we're voting on.
If you'd like us to add a sentence, we can add it in the chat, but I think we can easily add a sentence that conveys what Irina had just said, and also keeps things sort of in the spirit of what Susan is talking about and what Irina is talking about and Madeline and I and a lot of other folks are talking about. So I'm happy to craft that if we need to right now, if you want me to put it in chat. But I think it's something we should, it seems like there's consensus from people who are still on the call right now at this late hour who would be more likely to vote for a resolution that incorporates that.
It's not trying to dilute the big ask, which is enforcement. It's simply trying to wordsmith a bit, which Irina, it's a complicated thing for somebody like me who doesn't know as much as you do about the parks. DPR, CPP, like how it all works together. So it's just a fine tuning of who's working with whom. But what we're looking for is simply enforcement of the rules that are in the place, and then to have the proper systems in place to get that to happen. That's what it is.
I guess with all this in mind, it's 9:20. I think
I've had my hand up for quite a while.
Okay, Ken, please go. Sorry, we didn't mean to miss you inadvertently.
Okay. Sorry. I want to propose, I appreciate what Irina has been saying. I would like to propose another hopefully friendly amendment, which is very simple. For the second time in 2 months, we're calling on the NYPD to increase enforcement. Are we aware of what's going on on the outside world? I would like to remove the NYPD from this resolution. As the PEP officer was saying, it's a criminal summons if they decide to summon somebody. I don't think we should be calling for criminal summonses in Central Park, even for an off-leash dog. So can we remove the 2 references to the NYPD and limit it to the PEP?
No.
Well, that tells you something.
In which case I second it as a proposed resolution.
All right, yeah, it's a proposed amendment. If it's unfriendly, then we should vote on it.
I think it would be really tone deaf for us to call for police enforcement for the 3rd time in Central Park this year.
I just like to acknowledge that this issue was something that has come up, and that people, it is. I think there are a lot of things that we could be seen as tone deaf about on enforcement in our neighborhood, in our city, that have come up for votes. I think our obligation as a community board is when people come to us with resolutions and with ideas that we have an obligation to vote on them up or down. So I agree. Like if we want to vote on this as it is, we can vote on it now, or we can try to spend a few more minutes trying to craft it into something that we think will pass at the full board and represent the full community. So
I'd really appreciate if we could just vote on it the way it is right now. I have to say that I think that it's easy to say that this is a minor thing. Any number of times when I've said to people in the park, excuse me, it's the law to put your dog on a leash, they've said to me, don't you have something more important to worry about? And what I say to that is that There's so many things that I can't do anything about, but this is a minor, small thing that could lead to a really dangerous outcome. Something could be hurt, someone could be hurt. And I think it's our job not to determine which laws are important, which ones aren't. This is a law. It's the same thing as going through a red light. It's the law. And the resolution is straightforward as it stands, which is asking for enforcement of the laws that are on the books right now. And I really would appreciate it if we could just vote on that first.
Well, we have a
Elizabeth,
second.
I would suggest
Can I just say that if you all remember, Chris Cooper came to us a week before that it was the week before he was attacked by that woman, a week before, and he was asking for enforcement. And so this is what happens when you force park users to do enforcement. We're very lucky that nothing seriously happened to him when his race and his ethnicity was weaponized. So we have to I agree, we can't enforce our way out of this, but if the Central Park Police and the Park Enforcement Patrol, if they have on their books the responsibility of enforcing leash laws in protected areas, then they should be held accountable for it. Because I agree with Susan that something serious is going to happen one day, and then we're all going to ask ourselves why we didn't act on this sooner. So it could be enforcement education or not, but we can't keep putting enforcement in the hands of park users because someone is going to get hurt.
Yeah, and I think that I agree, and I think it also is incumbent upon our neighbors to be respectful all around. So once we have increasing civility all around on this, it will decrease the likelihood that people will be aggressive all the way around on every level. There have been people who have approached lots of people about this issue over time. And I feel like right now, given the time that we have on this call, I think the only issue right now before we vote is whether the friendly amendment that Arena had suggested should be included related to sort of the PEP and the PD. And Susan, I understand that's not something that you think would be considered, or?
No, Arena's suggestions are brilliant. I think those are great.
Okay.
But I'm not willing to take out the NYPD and the Central Park Police. But I will say, I gave some thought to showing a video that I filmed about a week ago where I was filming a dog walker who had, I think 7 or 10 dogs, I don't know how many it was, on the leash, but over the fence and in the water in the ramble. I didn't say anything to her. I filmed her. She came over and she hit me and she took my phone and she threw it in the air. And it was a terrifying experience. It was really terrifying. I decided not to show it tonight because I thought it would be distracting and unnecessary. Everyone's seen a lot of other videos of stuff in the park. But what Arena said is right. This should not be put in the hands of the park users. It really should not.
Right. And so I think that's what we're trying to do with this resolution.
Elizabeth, I would suggest, while I think Arena's ideas are good, I don't think that substantively they really change what we're asking for or would change what the reaction and follow up.
I actually think they do. So I would be more inclined to vote on this if it were incorporated as a friendly amendment. I think Susan, I would go with Susan's suggestion that we start out by voting up or down the resolution as written. But okay, so if somebody wants to call the question, we can vote on Susan's resolution right now.
Okay, I'll call it.
Okay, the question has been called. So who votes in favor of the resolution? I don't know, Mark, if you're still amongst the living and can put this on the screen so people know what we're voting on.
Yeah, how are we doing this, Mark?
Well, I'm glad. Well, no, I can't tally the vote and show you the resolution at the same time.
I'm happy to play secretary to tally the numbers. I think I can do that.
Yeah, but if I share screen, then you can't see the hands. Well, let's try it.
Okay.
Let's do it as a voice vote. We don't have that many people.
Okay, give me a second.
I mean, Elizabeth, does that work for you?
That works for me.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. I need to print something out so I know who I'm calling on.
This is with Arena's friendly amendments, correct?
No, this is how you see it.
It's just as it's being shown.
Don't we have to vote on amendments if they're not being seen as friendly?
Yes.
No, but arenas are friendly, isn't that correct?
Yes.
So aren't they, so voting affirmative would include arenas friendly
No,
amendments?
not right
No?
Oh,
now.
Wait a
Because-
second. So
Okay.
Arena's amendments, Arena, do you want to talk about this? Your amendment is simply to say that the park ranger should be, why don't you talk about it? But unmute first.
I had 3 suggestions, but now I have to see the amendment, I mean, the resolution. I'm sorry. One, as I recall, was to remove the last sentence in that paragraph that criticizes CPC, the Central Park Police and PEP. Because I don't.
I'm fine with that. I'm
Okay.
fine with that.
So
That is a friendly amendment.
That's
so
fine.
that's the lack of, like, that would come out. The other suggestion I had is therefore be it resolved that calls on the Central Park Police working together with I would put the New York City, I would take out and PEP, I would take that out. Working together with, I would begin with the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, and then in parentheses, I would put Park Enforcement Patrol and Rangers and the Central Park Conservancy to allocate their collective resources towards education and enforcing existing dog leash requirements. Well, I don't know if requirements is the right term, but rules.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of that.
I'm sorry,
so
Mark?
I'm trying to record what you're saying so that people can see what they're voting on. So I've got,
So in front of DPR, Mark, if you would just put NYC DPR.
it's defined above, so don't worry about that.
Oh, okay, cool. And then to allocate their collective resources towards education and enforcing.
Enforcement. That's great.
Enforcement of existing dog leash
rules.
Yeah, rules.
Well, you have their dog leash regulation.
Requirements.
You could take out requirement and other dog regulations, just dog leash regulations. You can take out requirement and other dog to protect the beloved parks and, okay.
Are we also adopting, I think it was it Matt or was it Jeff who said dogs should really be pets? Are we going with that? All right, so let's just assume that that's.
Sorry, the issue I have with that is that in Central Park, it all says dogs off leash. They refer to dogs, not pets, but.
Right, and so that's a good point, Susan.
Then we're not, okay.
I feel like we need
The sign
to.
specifically states dogs.
Yeah, I think for the purposes of this resolution, we keep it to dogs.
Okay.
I don't know, but so I see this all as friendly by my view as a co-chair of the committee, but Clary, do you?
Well, yeah, no, I think I think the education thing is counterproductive and a waste of time, but I would, to the extent I get a vote on whether it's friendly, I would say yes, but I have a question for Susan. Susan, this last change, which limits it to leash regulations, somewhere in here, I think you recite not leash things, what dog owners are supposed to do. It's on the first page, Mark. And well, we have not, there's that list there. We haven't really talked about that, and it's not certainly central to this discussion, but if Susan, you meant to encompass that list of things that are not leash things, we've knocked it out, but.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Thank you, Clary. It should be all regulations. It shouldn't just be the dog leash thing. Because, for example, when you go to the park and you groom your dog and you brush it, I've seen people who leave like gigantic piles of dog hair, and that you might think that's great for a bird.
Like you guys, I think we lose the focus of this resolution if we. I think we want enforcement. I think keeping that stuff in there. I think if we really.
But Elizabeth, I think just Karina slightly over
edited. Like there's a difference between a dog going and attacking somebody and a dog shedding a little bit in the park. We need to pick our battles here.
You could add dog. You could just include dog leash rules and related regulations
And other dog regulations, is that okay, Irina?
That's great. That's great.
I think
Okay,
that's
so
fine.
dog leash rules and other dog regulations.
I think that's fine, but again,
For
we've
dog-related
got to be
Yeah,
clear about what we're trying to do.
yeah, but Elizabeth, the text really talks about leashes, so we're not undermining ourselves by.
Yes, no, I agree. That's what the spirit of which this is intended. So.
I'm still concerned that there was an attempt at an unfriendly resolution or an unfriendly amendment. I don't know whether that was seconded by a committee member, but that is the way that these things are supposed to work. So now that you've defined the resolution, we do need to deal with that issue.
Mark, it was for the minutes seconded by a by Rick.
No, I'm not a
Roberts.
committee member.
Yeah.
Not a committee member. Okay.
Doug's talking.
So I don't think we have a second by a committee member. Which
And I'm
means
not
we should
one-
call the question on this resolution as friendly amended.
Yes.
So if Doug would record in the minutes that there was a resolution that was offered but not seconded, so at least our procedure is followed correctly. I think that's important. Thank you.
Okay.
So shall I do a roll call vote on this? Or what do you
Yeah,
want to do?
or one of us can, Mark. I don't know if you're, I mean, I'm happy to do it, but
I have it in front of me, so.
oh,
I'll
you
just-
do? Okay.
Okay, so, and I think my list is now up to date, but we'll find out. Elizabeth Caputo,
With the friendly amendments, I support it, yes.
this is with the friendly amendments. It's what we just showed on the screen. So Clary,
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy Cardinal, are you here?
Yes,
you are.
yes.
You're a yes, okay. Ken?
No.
Thank you. Natasha?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
And Doug McGowan?
Yes.
All right, so it passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 1 to 0 to 0. And then non-committee board members. Susan, would you lower your hand, please?
Sorry, did you get Clary?
Yes, he did.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, I did. And so non-committee board members in favor, raise your hand now, either physically or by, so I see Irena. I see Madeline, are you raising your hand?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. That's 2.
Doug.
Anybody?
Doug Kleiman.
Doug Kleiman. There you are. Thank you. Is 3. Is there anybody else? Barbara Adler. No, Barbara, you voted with the committee.
I know, but I'm not a member of Parks.
Oh,
Okay,
okay,
so-
take her off, Ellen.
Whoops. So all right, thank you, because that also helps me with my other work today, which is updating the committee rosters. So it's 6 to 1 to 0 to 0 is now the correct total. And now it's 4 in favor of the resolution for non-committee board members. Is there anyone else?
Excuse me, Mark. I think I've got 7 to 1 to 0 to 0.
1, 2.
No, Barbara's now off.
That was Barbara. Barbara voted twice.
I've got Elizabeth, Clary. I'm sorry, I got Clary twice. Never mind.
That'll do it. Okay.
Mark, what about you?
So I'm about to call voting against, non-committee board members voting against. Anybody?
Yeah, I think Arena's changes are great, but I can't vote for something calling for police enforcement.
So that's 1. Is there anybody else voting no? I don't see. Put in the chat if you're unable to speak and I'm not hearing you. I'm voting abstain for the same reasons that Rich votes no. And there's no one that's ineligible. So non-committee board members, it's 4 to 1 to 1 to 0. Resolution is adopted.
Thanks. Okay, so thanks everyone for hanging in there tonight. I know it's 9:35 and we are working on meeting management, try to make these things run smoothly, but I think these were both important conversations tonight. We do have Margaret Bracken, I think, who has bared with us tonight to join about our 3rd item, Clary, right?
Yes, we had suggested that Margaret, sitting at home, multitask if she wasn't going to.
And this should be
take
like
several
3
of
minutes
those.
of everyone's time, but a really cool, important 3 minutes, which hopefully everyone will enjoy hearing about, so.
So Margaret,
Yes.
thanks for multitasking and being with us, or maybe you were not even multitasking, but thanks for being with us
No, I
tonight.
was actually. Can I weigh in a little bit on the dog issue? You know,
Sure.
From the other side of the island, I mean, I'm seeing it. It is becoming a big problem again for us in Riverside Park because our dog runs are closing, and are closed at the moment. And as Jeff said, we don't know when they're going to reopen. And I'm seeing a sort of deterioration in some of the areas of landscape and really heavy off-leash dogs in all areas of the park. People are going into the synthetic turf ball field. And I'm one of those parks people who gets out of the car and kind of walks over and tries to explain and tries to reason with people. And there's kind of like two schools. There's the people who are sort of, well, I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm just going to keep doing it. And then there are the people, as Elizabeth said, who are sort of newer to the park and don't really realize it. But I'm a little bit concerned that people are kind of developing bad habits, that it's going to be really hard to break them off, once the dog runs are up and running again. So it's, it's not just a problem for Central Park. It's a big problem for us at the moment.
Jeff and Margaret, and if Jeff is, and Matt, if you're still, Matt is still with us, I'm not sure about Jeff. When we have this kind of discussion, both what Margaret has said and what other people have said about the closed dog runs, do you have a way to sort of take that up the chain and communicate the thoughts that came out of our meetings to the mayor and the commissioner? Or is that sort of like, don't even try?
Well, I think that John is on regular calls with Commissioner Silver. And, as both Matt and Jeff said, this is all decided, kind of way higher up the food chain. And it's sort of part of, this kind of phased opening strategy. So I'm not personally aware of any kind of influence that, that we have on this. But
So the only thing I'll add is that when I see people in the parks with off-leashed pets, and particularly dogs, is I do ask them to please leash their dogs. I do this all the time, and I do identify myself as the park manager. I have a little shield I carry around, so that helps. And I'd let them know that if they're in an area with they're supposed to leash their dog, that there's a multitude of reasons why they should keep their dog leashed. I don't want to get into too much detail about it, but I do let them know that if they care about the park, they should leash their dog. And oftentimes that works pretty well. Just to say, look, I understand you need to let your dog run, but maybe this isn't the best spot for it. And I apologize often because of the dog runs being closed. I wish they weren't closed. And I do let people know that the closure of the dog runs is not permanent. We do feel that at some point in the near future there will be is. So if they could just bear with us for the time being and try to just keep the dogs on the leash as best as possible, that's the best thing. Often people do comply. I don't have too many people who really put up a big fight with me and not just say the heck with you and not leash their dogs. So sometimes just trying to reason with people does pretty well. And just trying to find common ground with them is also a good strategy.
Jeff, I suspect they comply when you're in sight, and the next day they're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, enough on the dogs tonight.
Yeah.
Shall I pull up Margaret's slides?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. And
Margaret,
thanks
you're
everyone
on.
for entertaining us tonight.
Oh, give me 1 second. I'm not sure what happened here. Maybe this is it, and then that. Okay, yeah.
There we go. So this is a small sidewalk reconstruction. Typically, when we do these sidewalk reconstructions, it's capital funding and it's generally a fairly large area of sidewalk. This portion, two different portions of sidewalk at West 95th Street and West 97th Street it's actually funded by the Riverside Park Conservancy. So they have a private donor, individual donor who's very interested in helping us, fix some of these areas that have been problem areas and we haven't quite managed to get capital funding for. So if you'd like to move on to the next one, Mark. So our goals here, as I said, 2 small sections of really deteriorated sidewalk. Deteriorated asphalt pavement, in some cases, it's actually no asphalt pavement. What we typically do there, as you all know, Riverside Park is a scenic landmark. So we have a very specific palette for Riverside Drive. So anytime we do a reconstruction on Riverside Drive, we install asphalt block, hexagonal asphalt block pavers. So we're taking the deteriorated asphalt out and replacing with the hexagonal asphalt pavers. There are 2 existing tree pits in one area. So we'll be sort of redefining those tree pits with granite block landscape edging. And also the irregular conditions give us problems for, ADA and accessibility at the moment. So it'll be smooth and flush. And we have to replace a little bit of the steel face curb. If you can move on to the next one, please, Mark. So these are our locations right on Riverside Drive. If you're familiar with the bridge at 96th Street, so 96th Street is the street running east-west there with the 2 little white cars. And they're it's actually a bridge there. So the existing pavement there is concrete. So we're not going to touch that. That's sort of DOT territory on the bridge. But the areas immediately to the north and immediately to the south are the areas of this particular project. 97th Street, the entrance to the park at Dinosaur Playground, and 95th Street, there's also an entrance to the park. Next, please. These are slides that we put in for our various reviews. This is the flood risk. It's on Riverside Drive, elevated well away from any flood issues. Next slide, please. And in an area on the east side, totally residential, Riverside Drive, the west side, all parkland. Next, please, Mark. So these are our the 2 areas we're working on. This is 97th Street. So this is the northernmost portion. As you can see, there's some asphalt, it's not in great condition, and there's also some asphalt missing. And these are the 2 tree pits that we plan to, reinstall, enlarge and reinstall granite block around the perimeter of those trees. Existing steel panel fence will remain. That's on the left side. We put steel edging to sort of create an edge, a curb line for the new hex block pavers. And the curb on the right-hand side, which is an existing steel face curb, will remain. The next slide, Mark. This is the southern side. It actually kind of looks like asphalt, but the asphalt really is virtually all gone in this particular area. So it's basically just like gravel. And again, the existing fence will be a little bit of repair there, but basically will remain. The existing steel face curb will remain. Next one, Mark. Details of our paving conditions. Standing water, gravel, bad asphalt, just really sort of bad news. And I said an area, it's one of the, for all it's a very heavily used section of Riverside Drive, it's some of the worst perimeter pavement that we have in the park. So this is really exciting to have this money and to be able to, the thing is when we do these projects with private funds, we've done Hamilton Fountain, we've done a few other projects in the park, 72nd Street Dog Run, with private funds. But the really great thing about, doing this with private money is we can do it much more quickly. So our goal is to get this into construction in the next few weeks. We give it, I give the estimate to, or the scope to, 3 of our better capital contractors. They then bid and we go with, obviously, the most suitable and the best price there. So we're starting out, A, we can do it more quickly. And B, we're starting out with a pool of contractors that we know are very competent. Next slide, please. Last slide.
That is the last slide.
Oh, there should be one more.
Nope.
I don't think there ever was.
Darn it. I must have sent you the wrong one. So I had a couple of images of recent sidewalk reconstructions that we've done on Riverside Drive. One down at 92nd Street and another one up at 125th Street, one of which was done by the contractor that we're actually planning to use. So, they have a proven track ability for, getting these simple projects done quickly and professionally.
Margaret, do you have that up on your screen?
The other slide?
The last slide, do you have that up on your screen?
No, I don't.
Okay, because I could give you the chance to share, but
Doug, I see Doug's hand. Margaret, I don't think anybody's going to say they don't like this. I have one question. I have two questions. One is, do you want or need a resolution from us?
We don't. No,
You
I've
don't?
actually already submitted it to Landmarks, and it's such a simple, straightforward project that they're not looking for a resolution.
That was actually my other question, whether this had to or has or will go through LPC or PDC.
I sort of pretty much take everything to LPC just because I think it's, you know, it's better practice to have them sort of notified of all construction, especially seeing as this is on Riverside Drive. So it's going to be pretty visible. There's a bus stop there, you know, can't miss it. So better to make sure, you know, which is why we're having this conversation this evening, you know, make sure everybody's aware of it. Very simple project, but, you know, we want you to know about it.
Looks like we had a couple questions from Doug McGowan and Rich Robbins, maybe others. Doug, you have a question?
Not a question, just a point of information. I'm on the preservation committee, and we recently, in the past 6 months, approved the addition of an ADH ramp to the building just east of your northernmost part, where you're going to be redoing the sidewalk. And just for coordination sake, there'll be 2 closed sidewalks. I'm not sure exactly of their scheduling time, but that was approved recently, and it'll be right across from the work you're going to be doing. I think the work you're going to be doing is great.
So this is not actually part of the Riverside Park then? This is on the east side of Riverside Drive?
Correct. The building there on the corner of 97th Street is recently approved, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they were going to start as soon as the blocks were lifted for the work.
So
Just
we
something
will,
to look into.
Yeah, our contractor will have to get a permit from DOT. They've already applied for a permit. They have to get a permit from DOT, and they have to provide an alternative pedestrian, you know, lane, basically, where the vehicles are currently parked. So, you know, we'll be working with them to coordinate access in that area, because it's quite a long block, you know, to have to sort of cross over to the east side and then walk down east side and then cross back over. Adjacent to 2 entrances to the park. So we'll be working with them to, you know, retain pedestrian access.
Thanks, Margaret.
Elizabeth, you want to call on the others? You want me to? I'll move it along. We have Rich Robbins and then Ken.
So I was going to ask the same thing. I just want to clarify because crossing Riverside Drive in that area is really treacherous. So the pedestrian way that you'll be putting in will be replacing the parked cars in that 2-block stretch during the time of construction. And so allowing pedestrians to still have a place to go. I would say make it wide enough that, because there's a lot of both joggers and pedestrians there. It's a pretty trafficked area. And especially with people wanting to social distance, we want to make sure that there's enough room for people to get through. But that's great that there will be pedestrian space there because it's critical.
And also it's, it'll only take about 2 months. So 2 months is a long time to, you know, to close an area of sidewalk, but in the scheme of, as everybody knows, in the scheme of our projects, you know, 2 months, you know, getting it built so quickly and in just a couple of months is pretty good going.
Will they both sections be done at the same time, Margaret?
The contractor would like to do both at the same time, and I think it totally makes sense, you know.
Okay. Anybody else? Ken, did you?
Yeah, I just, Margaret, while we have you, just inside at 97th Street, the path that goes in front of the dinosaur playground and then heads north, as you know, it's really cratered. Are there any plans to resurface that?
Yes, good news. So we have, there's a, I mean, you probably all remember years ago, we used to talk a lot about requirements projects, and requirements was this kind of catch-all system where we did things like we would do a little bit of work in a playground, or, you know, there were the small projects that were never really big enough for big capital projects. And, you know, but regardless, were really kind of crucial and important. And that sort of division has kind of turned into another initiative, which we call State of Good Repair. And the idea, again, is to have it as a really simple project. But this time they've simplified it even more. Like, forget about play equipment and things like that. Let's just do area park where there is really, really deteriorated sidewalk or asphalt pavement, basically that simple. We couldn't do the hex block pavement with this project. We can just do asphalt. So that is one of 4 sites that we're going to be doing with that funding, and that should go into construction probably next year. So
can you just tell us quickly what the other sites are, Margaret? And then I think we're done for the night, I think.
And this you'll see. I mean, you know, I'll come and we'll do this.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
Project.
Great.
But the other area is down at 83rd Street. As you enter the park at 79th Street and go north along the park wall, between the park wall and the playground, there's a very deteriorated section of sidewalk there. There's also a fairly large area immediately south and the perimeter paths around the 105th Street dog run that's in really poor condition. So that's another area. And there's another area up by 148th Street in up by the playground there. So
we'll be very happy to have you back to show us more about this.
Yeah, no, we'll look at those in more detail. But there's super simple, straightforward asphalt replacement.
Margaret, if I could just throw in my 2 cents worth here, which is to please thank the Conservancy and their anonymous donor.
Right.
This is a fantastic solution. It eliminates all the issues that you always find yourself embroiled with about sourcing and spending funds. And so while I think our parks should be funded fully by the people who are in the business of funding our parks, I think we're all grateful for this measure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'll tell Dan and the others.
Thank you, Margaret, and to the Conservancy and all the folks who are still on the call. I think that wraps us up, Clary, unless there are another item that we need to address tonight.
Unless there was anything else Margaret wanted to tell us. I think we're done.
We've kept everyone for over 3 hours. We really appreciate everyone hanging in there. I know these issues have been really important, and appreciate everyone contributing tonight. And you know, we'll see how this all goes, but really appreciate everyone's contributions. So I think I'm ready to sign off if you are.
Yeah, no, just one last observation, Elizabeth. I've seen in the Q&A, I just saw that there were lots of stuff in the Q&A. Some people put into the Q&A what seemed to be questions to be directed in our letter to DOT about specific factual questions about the signaling situation, which I'm using shorthand for. So anybody who hasn't done that and wants to add them, please send them to the 4 co-chairs and Mark to work with.
Or put them in the chat.
Or put them in the chat.
Exactly.
Well, these are all in Q&A. They're not in the chat.
Right. Q&A doesn't get saved. The chat does.
Yeah, the chat. I can cut and paste from the Q&A, Mark, and I think right now.
All right. I'll stay on and do that. You guys can adjourn.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, no, you can't cut and paste from the chat, can you? Okay, that appears to be it.